Malik sat in the back of Mr. Johnson's advanced chemistry class, staring blankly at the board. His mind wasn't on the periodic table or the complicated equations. Instead, it was on the clock ticking away, slowly robbing him of the time to finish his assignment. He couldn't help but feel out of place. As usual, he was the only black student in the room. His classmates, all seemingly perfect in their school uniforms, were discussing the test results from last week. They spoke with confidence, as if they knew everything, while Malik just sat there, trying to keep up with their fast-paced conversations. But he had never felt like he fit in with them. Ever since he transferred to this prestigious school, Malik had been treated like an outsider. He glanced at Mr. Johnson, the well-respected, middle-aged teacher who had earned a reputation for being tough but fair. The way Mr. Johnson taught made Malik feel even more invisible. It wasn't just the complicated lectures, it was the way he dismissed Malik's contributions. Mr. Johnson had a way of assuming that Malik wouldn't understand the material. Malik often wondered if it was because of his background or the way he looked. But today was different. Today, Malik was determined to prove he belonged here. His mom, Maya, always told him that he was capable of great things, that he just had to keep pushing. So, when Mr. Johnson handed out the new assignment, a complex chemistry problem, Malik was ready. He looked down at the question, describe the molecular structure of the compound and explain its reaction in an oxygen-deficient environment. For most students in the class, this would be a standard challenge. But for Malik, the question seemed to blur. He had been struggling to keep up with the material, but he refused to let this moment defeat him. He stared at the problem, feeling the pressure building. The other students had already started scribbling down their answers, confident and quick, while Malik's hand stayed still. But then, something clicked. Malik's mind surged into overdrive, and for the first time in weeks, he felt his brain align with the subject matter. His fingers moved across the page rapidly, each equation flowing as if he'd known the answer all along. He didn't just solve the problem, he cracked it. In fact, he found a way to explain the compound's behavior using a theory that none of his classmates had considered. It was a bold approach, but Malik was certain it was right. With a sigh of relief, he handed in his paper just as the bell rang. He felt the eyes of his classmates on him, some of them glancing over with raised eyebrows, others whispering to one another. Malik ignored them. His heart was pounding, but he felt powerful, in control. But little did he know, this was just the beginning of the story that would change everything. Later that afternoon, Mr. Johnson stood at the front of the class, preparing to review the answers. His voice carried with authority as he began, "Now, let's take a look at the results of the assignment. I'm sure most of you found the task a bit challenging, but you did well." Malik shifted in his seat, nervous but also strangely confident. He had done well, he knew he had. Mr. Johnson paused, glancing at the papers in front of him. Then, he locked eyes with Malik. "Malik," he called out, "I noticed your answer didn't quite follow the typical method we've been using in class. You've gone off script a bit here." Malik's heart sank. He had been expecting praise, or at least acknowledgement. Instead, there was something about Mr. Johnson's tone that felt dismissive, like he was about to make an example of him. The class went silent, and all eyes were on him. "Can you explain why you chose this unconventional approach?" Mr. Johnson asked, his voice sharp. "It's clear you didn't follow the instructions closely. Are you sure this is the correct answer?" Malik swallowed hard. He had anticipated some resistance, but not like this. He had spent hours working on the theory, cross-referencing textbooks and online resources, but to Mr. Johnson, it just looked like a mistake. I believe my approach is correct, sir," Malik stammered. "I used a different formula to calculate the reaction, and it fits the results." Mr. Johnson raised an eyebrow. "And you're certain this is right? Because based on the data we've gone over in class, it's highly unlikely that your method would yield the correct results." Malik's stomach twisted. The other students in the class exchanged glances, some of them shaking their heads. Malik could feel the weight of their judgment on his shoulders. He was used to being underestimated, but this felt different. It wasn't just about the chemistry, it was about who he was, where he came from, and how he was constantly being dismissed. "I'm sure, sir," Malik replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I really think this works." Mr. Johnson's expression hardened. "Well, I'd like to see how you justify this further. After class, meet me in my office. We'll go over it, and if you can convince me that your method is valid, I'll reconsider." The bell rang again, signaling the end of class. The other students quickly gathered their things, some muttering to each other about Malik's audacity to challenge Mr. Johnson. Malik felt his face flush with embarrassment. He gathered his books, his mind racing. What now? He thought. He had always been an outsider in this school, but now he was about to be branded as someone who didn't know his place. The self-doubt crept in, but he refused to give up. He couldn't let this moment define him. As he walked to Mr. Johnson's office, he couldn't help but wonder, what if I'm wrong? What if my answer is a mistake? But deep down, something told him that he wasn't. That maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment that proved he was more than what they all thought. When Malik entered the office, Mr. Johnson was already sitting behind his desk, looking over the paper again. "Let's see what you've got, Malik," Mr. Johnson said, his tone more neutral now. But the challenge was still there. Malik took a deep breath and began to explain, piece by piece, how he arrived at his answer. As he spoke, he noticed something: Mr. Johnson wasn't interrupting him as usual. He was listening, really listening. By the time Malik finished, Mr. Johnson's expression had changed. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was curiosity. "Okay, Malik," he said slowly. "I'm impressed. I think you might be onto something here. But we'll have to run some tests to be sure." Malik felt a rush of relief. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, he felt like he was being taken seriously. "Thank you, sir," Malik said, his voice shaking slightly. He walked out of the office with a sense of accomplishment, but also the realization that he had just taken the first step toward proving himself. This wasn't just about chemistry. It was about everything, about the way the world saw him, and the way he was going to change that forever. What if you thought you knew everything about a student, but they completely changed your perspective in just a moment? Malik smiled to himself. He was starting to believe it. This could be the start of something huge. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The next morning, Malik sat on the bus, staring out the window as the city passed by. His mind was still racing from the previous day. The conversation with Mr. Johnson had gone better than he expected, but it didn't make the whispers and side glances from his classmates go away. He wasn't sure what had come over him yesterday, but something inside of him had snapped into focus. It was more than just solving a chemistry problem. For the first time in his life, Malik was beginning to believe in his own intelligence, in his ability to contribute something valuable to the world around him. But now he had to figure out how to hold on to that belief in the face of everyone who doubted him. Malik wasn't naive. He knew that people, especially at this school, often judged him based on the color of his skin and the neighborhood he came from. There were plenty of whispers behind his back, and even some of the teachers treated him like he didn't belong here. But yesterday, with Mr. Johnson, Malik had seen something different: the possibility of respect. Maybe even admiration. He had been at this school for nearly a year now, and in all that time, not a single teacher had ever given him a chance to shine. Everyone assumed that because he came from a poor background, because he was a black student in a sea of white faces, he wasn't going to amount to much. But Malik was done with letting people decide who he was before he had the chance to show them. His mom had always told him that his intelligence was his superpower. But growing up, he'd never seen it that way. Maya, his mom, worked 2 jobs to support him, always trying to make sure that he had what he needed. And while Malik appreciated her sacrifice, he also saw the way the world treated her, just like it treated him. She'd tell him that he had greatness inside of him, but when you live in a world that constantly tells you that you're not good enough, it's hard to believe it. The bus hit a pothole, jolting Malik out of his thoughts. He looked around, noticing the usual suspects, the same group of rich, entitled students who didn't care to even look his way. But there was one student in particular whom Malik noticed. It was Jasmine, a quiet, observant girl who sat across the aisle. Jasmine was different. She wasn't one of the popular kids, but she wasn't a total outsider either. She was smart, really smart, and always seemed to understand Malik in a way no one else did. They weren't close friends, but they'd shared a few conversations about school and life, and Malik could tell that Jasmine didn't buy into the same stereotypes that everyone else seemed to. She saw something in Malik that no one else did, potential. She caught his eye as he glanced over. There was a faint smile on her face, one of encouragement, as if she knew exactly what was going on in his head. Malik gave a small, appreciative nod. He didn't feel the need to explain himself to her. Jasmine already understood him better than anyone else. At school that day, the weight of yesterday's events was still heavy in the air. Malik had tried to put it out of his mind, but when he walked into Mr. Johnson's class, all eyes were on him. He could feel the stares, the whispers behind his back. He ignored it, sitting at his usual seat in the back of the room, trying to focus on the lecture. Mr. Johnson walked in with a stack of papers in his hands. His expression was neutral, but there was something different about him. It was almost like he had started to see Malik in a new light. The tension in the room was palpable, and it made Malik's heart race. "All right, class," Mr. Johnson said, his voice calm but carrying. "Today we'll be discussing the results of your chemistry assignments. I've gone over some of your work, and there are a few pieces that stand out." "Malik," he said, and the entire class turned to look at him. Malik felt his stomach tighten. He wasn't sure if this was going to be good or bad. Yesterday, I challenged Malik's approach to the problem. And I'll be honest, I thought he had made a mistake. But after reviewing his work again, I have to say, I was wrong. His method was unorthodox, but it was brilliant. He showed a depth of understanding that most of us overlooked. Malik's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Had Mr. Johnson just praised him? He looked around, and for the first time, he saw something he hadn't expected: respect. His classmates were staring at him with wide eyes, a few of them nodding in acknowledgement. Mr. Johnson continued, "Malik, I want to talk to you more about this after class. I think we might have missed something in our standard approach to the material. This is the kind of thinking that can change the way we look at problems. I'm excited to explore this further with you." Malik's face burned with a mixture of pride and disbelief. The class passed in a blur, and soon enough, the bell rang. Malik gathered his things and headed toward Mr. Johnson's office. His hands were still shaking with adrenaline, but there was a spark of something new, something unfamiliar, inside of him. Hope. When he reached Mr. Johnson's office, he knocked lightly on the door. Mr. Johnson looked up from his desk, his glasses perched on his nose. There was a warmth to his smile that made Malik's heart race. "Come in, Malik. I'm glad you stopped by. Let's take a look at your work together." Malik sat across from the teacher, still trying to wrap his head around what had just happened. He had never imagined that Mr. Johnson would give him the time of day, let alone admit he was wrong. But here they were, sitting in Mr. Johnson's office, looking over the assignment that had started it all. "Malik, this is impressive," Mr. Johnson said, tapping the paper with his pen. "Your approach isn't something we normally teach, but after thinking about it, it makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the answers, it's about how you arrived at them. You've got a talent for thinking outside the box." Malik felt a mix of disbelief and pride. This was the validation he had always wanted but never expected. Mr. Johnson was admitting he was wrong, and Malik was being recognized for his unique perspective. Thanks, Malik said quietly, his voice cracking slightly. I've been working on this for a while. I just never thought anyone would take me seriously. You'd be surprised, Mr. Johnson replied, his smile widening. You've got a lot of potential, Malik. Don't sell yourself short. I'll be working with you more closely from now on, if you're up for it. Malik's heart soared. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. And not just as another student in the back of the room, but as someone who had something to offer. I'm up for it, Malik said, his voice steady now. I want to prove that I'm more than what people think I am. Mr. Johnson nodded. I have no doubt that you will. As Malik walked out of the office, his thoughts were a whirlwind. He didn't know what this new chapter would bring, but he was ready to face it. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting for recognition, he was fighting for himself. And that felt like the first real step towards something bigger than he had ever imagined. What if you thought you knew everything about a student, but they completely changed your perspective in just a moment? Malik smiled to himself, feeling more certain than ever. This was just the beginning. The days following his conversation with Mr. Johnson were a blur. Every morning, Malik woke up with a new sense of purpose, a drive that had been missing for years. He found himself diving deeper into his studies, the problems once daunting now becoming opportunities to challenge himself. He spent hours in the library, reviewing the materials Mr. Johnson had recommended, refining his understanding of chemistry. But with each passing day, something else began to shift. The whispers. The sideways glances. The mockery. It all escalated. It started subtly. A few offhand comments in the hallways. Casual jabs at lunch. He overheard one of the boys in his chemistry class, Jared, laughing with his friends. Did you see Malik trying to play professor? Please, that kid's a joke. At first, Malik brushed it off. He had grown used to the casual racism, the subtle exclusion. But with Mr. Johnson's praise still fresh in his mind, Malik was starting to realize just how little the other students understood about him, or his potential. Then came the real challenge. It was a Wednesday, just over a week after Mr. Johnson's surprising acknowledgement of his work, when Malik's world seemed to turn upside down. He had stayed late in the chemistry lab, working on a new experiment Mr. Johnson had assigned him. As he carefully adjusted the beakers and chemical solutions, he felt the presence of someone behind him. He turned around to find Jared and two of his friends leaning against the doorframe. What's up, Malik? You still playing scientist? Jared sneered. Malik tensed. He had hoped to finish his work in peace, but now it was clear Jared wasn't going to let him off that easily. I'm just trying to get ahead on the new assignment, Malik replied, trying to keep his voice steady, despite the knot forming in his stomach. You mean that big chemistry project? Jared laughed, taking a few steps into the room. His friends followed. Yeah, we heard about how Mr. Johnson gave you that little praise. Good for you, I guess. But do you really think you can keep up with us? You're not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, are you? Malik's heart pounded. The old insecurities came rushing back. The sting of being seen as other. The frustration of constantly being underestimated. Why don't you just focus on your own stuff, Jared? Malik said, standing up from the desk, trying to maintain control. This is my work, not yours. Jared didn't back down. You think you can be one of us just because you got a little attention from Mr. Johnson? Trust me, you'll never be good enough for this class. You're just lucky he's lowering his standards to give you a chance. He smirked, clearly enjoying the discomfort he was causing. Malik stood his ground. Maybe it's not about luck. Maybe it's about hard work. Jared's face twisted in a mockery of a smile. Hard work? Yeah, keep telling yourself that. You'll never be on our level. You're just another charity case. For a moment, everything inside Malik screamed to leave, to avoid the confrontation, to retreat back to the safety of the silence he had known for so long. But something inside him refused to back down. "I don't need your approval, Jared," Malik said, his voice firm, his eyes unwavering. "I know what I'm capable of. And it's more than you'll ever understand." There was a tense silence. Jared's smirk faltered, and for a moment, he seemed unsure of what to do next. His friends shifted uncomfortably behind him, sensing the growing tension. But then, Jared's face hardened again, his expression souring as if Malik had crossed an invisible line. "You'll regret talking to me like that, Malik," Jared sneered. "I promise you, you'll regret it." Malik didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid of Jared. He was tired of being afraid. "Maybe you should focus more on yourself, Jared," Malik said coldly, turning back to his work. "Maybe then you wouldn't be so miserable all the time." Jared stood there for a moment, his fists clenched, his chest rising and falling with anger. But after a few long seconds, he turned and stormed out of the room, his friends following, muttering under their breath. Malik exhaled, his heart still racing. The encounter had shaken him, but it had also reminded him of something important. He didn't need anyone's validation, especially not from people like Jared. He had to believe in himself, even when everyone else was trying to tear him down. The next day, as Malik entered Mr. Johnson's class, he couldn't shake the feeling of the weight that had settled in his chest. The last few days had been a roller coaster, and he was starting to feel the strain of constantly having to defend himself. But Mr. Johnson's words kept him going. He had told Malik that he had potential. That he had the ability to think differently, to see things from a new perspective. And maybe that's what kept him focused in the face of all the negativity. As he sat down in his seat, he was surprised to see that Mr. Johnson wasn't standing at the front of the class, ready to begin the lesson. Instead, there was a new sense of urgency in the air. Students were talking among themselves, clearly curious about something. Then, Mr. Johnson stepped into the room, holding up a piece of paper. "Class, I've just received a letter from the State Science Fair Committee," he said, his voice carrying through the room. "Malik, I hope you're listening closely to this." Malik's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard anything about the State Science Fair. He'd never considered entering something like that, especially with the way things had been going lately. But now, all eyes were on him. The committee was impressed by the unconventional approach Malik took in his last assignment, Mr. Johnson continued, and they've invited him to represent our school at the upcoming State Science Fair. This is an incredible opportunity, and I'm very proud of Malik for earning this recognition. The room fell silent. Malik's mind raced. Was this a joke? Was he really being recognized for his work? He glanced around, seeing his classmates' stunned expressions. They were all looking at him as if he were someone completely different. Jared, sitting a few rows over, had his mouth slightly open. He looked like he had just been slapped. His eyes flicked to Malik with something that resembled disbelief. Mr. Johnson smiled at Malik. "I'll be honest, I didn't expect this. But I'm excited to see where this leads. Congratulations, Malik." Malik felt his chest swell with pride, but at the same time, a deep sense of nervousness washed over him. This was his moment, but it was also a challenge. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, he felt like he was stepping into his true potential. What do you do when the world finally starts to see you the way you've always seen yourself? Malik stood in that classroom, feeling like he was standing on the edge of something huge. This was the moment that would either break him or make him. But as he looked out at the faces of his classmates, he felt a surge of confidence. He wasn't just a charity case. He wasn't just the quiet black kid from the wrong side of town. He was someone who had earned his place here. And nothing, not even Jared, was going to take that away from him. The invitation to the State Science Fair was a game changer. It felt like Malik had been given a second chance, a real shot to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was more than just a label. The week following Mr. Johnson's announcement, things began to shift in subtle but significant ways. The whispers had quieted. The same students who had once dismissed him now looked at him with a mix of curiosity and cautious respect. Some of them, especially the ones who had previously mocked him, began to avoid him altogether. They probably didn't want to risk being caught in the crossfire of his newfound confidence. But it wasn't just the other students who had changed. Malik could feel it in himself too. There was a fire burning inside him now. When he studied, it wasn't out of obligation anymore. He wasn't just trying to get by. He was working with purpose, with intent. Every equation, every experiment was a step closer to something bigger than he had ever dreamed of. Despite his newfound motivation, the pressure was mounting. Malik couldn't shake the feeling that this was a huge responsibility. The state science fair wasn't just another competition, it was the opportunity to change the narrative around who he was. But with that opportunity came the risk of failure. Malik had spent years hiding his intellect, afraid of standing out, afraid of being different. And now, here he was, on the verge of something that could either define him or break him. It was the type of pressure that could easily crush someone if they weren't careful. It was Thursday afternoon when Malik walked into the library, the weight of his project heavy on his shoulders. He was trying to finalize his experiment for the fair, a project that used alternative methods to create renewable energy. It wasn't just about impressing the judges, it was his way of showing that he had a vision for the future, something that could have a real impact. He sat at a table near the back, spread out his notes, and opened his laptop. But as he began to review his work, he was interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. "Mind if I sit here?" Malik looked up to see Jasmine standing there. He hadn't seen her in a while, not since their casual conversation in the bus after Mr. Johnson's class. She was one of the few students who had always treated him like he was capable, like he belonged. "Sure," Malik said, gesturing to the seat across from him. "I didn't know you were a library person." "I'm not, but I figured I should start studying for finals." Jasmine shrugged and dropped her bag on the chair. "Besides, I could use a little distraction. How's the science fair project going?" Malik hesitated. He hadn't really talked to anyone about it yet, other than Mr. Johnson. Everyone seemed to be watching him from a distance, waiting to see if he would mess up or make a fool of himself. "It's going," he said, tapping his fingers nervously on the edge of the table. "It's just a lot of pressure. You know how it is, everyone's expecting something big, and I'm not sure if I can deliver." Jasmine raised an eyebrow, her gaze steady. "So, what's really holding you back?" Malik shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He didn't want to admit the truth. He didn't want to admit that, despite all his progress, he still didn't believe in himself fully. "It's just, what if they look at me and think I don't belong there?" Malik finally said, the words coming out before he could stop them. "I mean, it's a science fair. These people are geniuses. And I'm just, me." Jasmine leaned forward, folding her arms across the table. "I get it. It's easy to feel like you don't belong. But the thing is, you're not just you. You've got something to offer that a lot of people don't. That's why you're in the science fair in the first place, right?" Malik stared at her, unsure of how to respond. He had heard people say things like this before, but hearing it from Jasmine made it feel real for the first time. "You don't have to be perfect," she continued. "You just have to be you. And that's what will set you apart." For the first time in a long while, Malik felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Maybe Jasmine was right. Maybe he didn't have to live up to some impossible standard. Maybe all he needed to do was trust in himself and let everything else fall into place. The days following that conversation were filled with long hours of work and late nights in the lab. Malik had poured himself into his project, fine-tuning the details and adjusting the calculations. Each experiment was a test of his limits, each success a step forward. But with every new challenge came the looming question, what if it's not enough? The morning of the science fair arrived sooner than Malik expected. He woke up to the sound of his mom's voice calling from downstairs, urging him to hurry. "Malik! You're going to be late if you don't get up right now. Malik rubbed his eyes and sat up in bed. He was nervous in a way he had never been before. But there was something else there too. Excitement. A sense that he was on the verge of something incredible. He just had to push through the fear. After a quick breakfast, Malik grabbed his project materials, carefully packed in a box, and headed out the door. His mom, Maya, stood by the car, offering him a smile. "You got this, Malik," she said, her voice full of pride. "Just remember, you've already proven that you're more than capable. Now go show them what you can do." Malik gave her a quick hug, feeling the warmth of her encouragement settle deep inside him. The science fair was being held in the largest conference hall in the city, and when Malik walked in, he was immediately struck by the sheer number of students gathered around their tables. There were kids from all over the state, each with their own unique projects, and it felt overwhelming. The tables were lined with posters, models, and research papers, each student standing proudly beside their work. Malik found his assigned table in the back of the room, tucked between two other projects. He set up his materials carefully, adjusting the positioning of his project display. But as he set up, he couldn't help but notice the way the other students looked at him. Their eyes skimmed over his project, then moved on to the next. It was clear that, to them, he didn't belong. But Malik didn't let it bother him. He had come too far to let their judgment derail him now. He was here for himself, not for them. As the judging began, Malik felt his nerves tighten. He was paired with two judges, a middle-aged man and a younger woman, both of whom looked skeptical as they approached his table. The woman was the first to speak. "So, Malik, tell us about your project." Malik took a deep breath and began to explain, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart. He walked them through the science behind his renewable energy project, outlining his methods and the potential applications. As he spoke, he could see the judges nodding, their skepticism slowly turning into interest. By the time he finished his presentation, both judges were taking notes, their expressions no longer indifferent. Malik's heart swelled. He had done it. He had earned their attention, their respect. As they moved on to the next table, Malik couldn't help but smile to himself. He hadn't just proved his intellect, he had proved to everyone, including himself, that he was worthy of this moment. What does it feel like to stand tall when everyone expects you to fall? Malik stood there, watching the judges walk away, a feeling of accomplishment washing over him. He had fought for this moment, and now, he knew that no one, could take it from him. The days after the science fair felt like a whirlwind. Malik had spent weeks preparing for the event, pouring hours into his research, his experiments, and his presentation. He had done everything he could, and for the first time in his life, he felt confident, truly confident, in his work. He knew he had done his best, and as the judging came to an end, he felt a sense of peace settle in. But peace didn't last long. The phone call came that Friday afternoon, and Malik's heart stopped when he saw the unknown number on the screen. It was the State Science Fair Committee. "Hello, Malik," a voice said on the other end. It was the same voice he'd heard at the event, calm and professional. "Yes," Malik said, his voice shaking slightly. "I'm calling to inform you that after reviewing all of the projects, we've decided to award you first place in the renewable energy category. Congratulations. Your project stood out for its innovative approach and clear potential for real-world application." Malik stood frozen, his mind trying to process the words. "First place? Me? Wait, are you serious?" Malik stammered. "Yes, absolutely. We would like to invite you to the award ceremony next week, where you'll receive a certificate and a scholarship for further research in this field. You've impressed the judges, Malik. This is just the beginning for you." For a long moment, Malik couldn't speak. It felt like time had stopped. First place. Scholarship. Recognition. He had done it. His work, His hours of studying, and his determination had paid off. He had earned something that no one could take away from him. "Thank you. Thank you so much," Malik finally managed to say. His voice was thick with emotion. "You've earned it," the voice said before hanging up. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Malik could barely focus on anything else, his mind racing with the implications of the news. First place. He couldn't stop repeating the words in his head. He had finally proven to himself, and to everyone who had doubted him, that he was capable of more than they'd ever imagined. But even as he walked through the hallways the next day, his head held high, there was still a lingering tension in the back of his mind. It wasn't about the recognition. It was about the people who had watched him struggle, the ones who had whispered behind his back and mocked him for years. Jared, for instance. Malik had seen him lurking in the hallways, his eyes scanning Malik with an air of disbelief. He hadn't said a word since the science fair, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. It was hard for Malik to ignore that tension. Every step he took felt like a victory, but a part of him still wondered if the world would ever truly accept him. That afternoon, as Malik was walking out of class, he ran into Jared again. This time, Jared didn't move out of the way. Instead, he stopped in front of Malik, arms crossed, his face unreadable. "Hey," Jared said, his voice casual but with an edge. "I heard you won the science fair." Malik paused, feeling his heart rate quicken. There was something different in Jared's tone, something that felt like an unspoken challenge. "Yeah," Malik replied, trying to keep his voice even. "I did." Jared smirked. "Guess you're not so bad after all. I'll give you that." Malik wasn't sure what to make of that. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't the mockery he had expected either. "I guess not," Malik said, giving a slight nod. "You should try pushing yourself, Jared. You might surprise yourself too." Jared looked taken aback for a moment, then let out a short laugh. "Maybe I will. Who knows?" Malik didn't wait for him to say anything else. He turned and walked away, but as he did, he couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Jared had never been the problem. The problem had always been Malik's own doubt. As the week passed, the anticipation for the award ceremony grew. Malik couldn't focus on anything other than the event. His family was excited, his mom beaming with pride every time she saw him, and even his little sister, Layla, was making drawings of him with a big trophy. It felt surreal, but it also felt like a dream come true. On the day of the ceremony, Malik woke up early, nerves buzzing in his stomach. His mom had already arranged for them to leave early, and as they drove to the venue, Malik felt his heart beating faster with every mile. The ceremony was taking place at a prestigious university in the city, and the whole event was going to be a formal affair with scholars, professionals, and community leaders in attendance. When they arrived, Malik was in awe of the grand auditorium. The place was filled with students and their families, all dressed in their best outfits, each person walking with pride. The walls were lined with banners, and tables were set up displaying the projects of students who had competed in different categories. The air was thick with excitement and anticipation. Malik and his family found their seats in the middle of the auditorium, and as they waited for the ceremony to begin, Malik couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. This was real. This was happening. He looked over at his mom, who was sitting next to him, her eyes full of pride. "You've worked so hard for this moment," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "Just remember, you've already won." Malik smiled at her, grateful for her support. His mom had always been there for him, through every challenge and every setback. She was his rock. The ceremony began with speeches from various officials and sponsors, but Malik's attention was focused solely on the moment when his name would be called. His stomach was a swirl of excitement and nerves. When it finally came time for the renewable energy category to be announced, Malik's heart raced. The presenter read out the names of the runners-up, and Malik could hardly breathe. His name wasn't called. Then, the presenter paused, a small smile on their face. And the first place winner in the renewable energy category is Malik Thompson. Malik's breath caught in his throat. The room erupted into applause, and he stood up, feeling like he was floating. He walked to the stage with shaky legs, a mixture of disbelief and pride swelling inside him. The presenter handed him a trophy and a certificate, and as he took it in his hands, he finally felt like everything he had worked for had come to fruition. "Thank you," Malik said into the microphone, his voice cracking slightly. I just want to say thank you to my mom, my teachers, and everyone who believed in me. This is just the beginning." The applause that followed felt like a roar. And as Malik stood there, holding his trophy, he realized that he had not only won first place at the science fair, he had won something much bigger. He had finally found his place in the world. What does it feel like to know you're no longer invisible? Malik stood on that stage, feeling seen for the first time in his life. This wasn't just a trophy, it was the beginning of a new chapter. He had made it. And nothing, no one, could ever take that away from him. The next few weeks were a blur. Malik's life had shifted in ways he hadn't anticipated. After winning the state science fair, the spotlight on him grew brighter. Teachers began approaching him after class with congratulations and questions about his project, offering mentorship and even suggesting that he pursue a career in renewable energy. Even classmates, who had once ignored or ridiculed him, were suddenly more interested in what he had to say. At first, Malik enjoyed the attention. He was proud of his achievement and thrilled by the validation he received. But as time passed, something unexpected happened, the pressure started to build. People began expecting more from him, and he wasn't sure he could keep up with it. His phone buzzed one afternoon as he sat in his bedroom, flipping through his notes for an upcoming math test. It was a message from Mr. Johnson. "Mr. Johnson, Malik, I just got off a call with a colleague at Stanford University. They're interested in your project. They'd like to discuss a potential scholarship opportunity for you. Are you free to talk tomorrow?" Malik blinked at the screen, trying to process the words. Stanford. Scholarship. He had never even considered college, let alone the possibility of attending a prestigious university. He had always thought of his future as something that just happened to him, something that was beyond his control. But now, it felt as though the universe was offering him a chance he could never have imagined. He quickly typed back a response. "Malik, yes, I'm free. Thank you, Mr. Johnson." Malik sat back, his mind racing. A scholarship? To Stanford? It was too much to take in. He had always felt like he was an outsider, like his intelligence and potential were invisible to the world. But now, the world seemed to be opening up to him in ways he couldn't understand. The next day, Malik met Mr. Johnson after school in the small, quiet office in the back of the science department. The room was cluttered with papers, old textbooks, and science equipment, but Mr. Johnson's presence made it feel like a place of quiet authority. When Malik sat down, Mr. Johnson smiled at him, a warm, proud smile that made Malik feel both anxious and excited. "I spoke to Dr. Greenberg, the admissions officer from Stanford," Mr. Johnson said, his voice steady. "She's impressed by your project and your work ethic. She believes that you have what it takes to succeed there. They're offering you a full scholarship to attend." Malik's mouth went dry. "A full scholarship?" "Yes," Mr. Johnson said. "They're offering you an opportunity to pursue your studies in renewable energy. It's a huge deal, Malik. This could be the start of an incredible journey for you." Malik could hardly believe what he was hearing. Stanford. A full scholarship. It felt like a dream. "Mr. Johnson, I don't know what to say," Malik stammered. He was overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, excitement, disbelief, and fear. Could he really do this? Could he leave his small town, leave everything he knew, and start fresh at one of the most prestigious universities in the world? "You don't have to say anything yet," Mr. Johnson said, sensing Malik's hesitation. Take some time to think about it. But I want you to know that this is your chance to take your work, and your life, into your own hands. You've earned this. Malik nodded, though his mind was racing. He knew that Mr. Johnson was right. He had earned this. But could he really step into this new world? Could he really leave behind everything he knew, everything that had once felt safe? The next few days were filled with intense inner conflict. Malik's mind was torn between the excitement of the opportunity and the fear of the unknown. He spent hours talking to his mom, getting her opinion on the matter. She was, as always, supportive. "You're not just doing this for you, Malik," his mom said one evening, as they sat at the kitchen table. "This is about your future. It's about making the most of the talent you have. You've worked so hard, and now the world is recognizing that. You can't let fear hold you back." "I know, Mom," Malik replied, his voice soft. "But I'm scared. I don't want to leave home. What if I don't fit in? What if I fail?" His mom reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "You won't fail. You have everything it takes to succeed. Just remember, you don't have to go alone. We'll always be here, supporting you, cheering you on." Her words calmed him, but the uncertainty remained. The decision wasn't just about the scholarship or the chance to go to Stanford, it was about everything he had ever known. The thought of leaving his friends, his family, and the town he had grown up in was overwhelming. The decision came when Malik was sitting in his room, alone. His laptop was open in front of him, displaying an email from the admissions office at Stanford. He had been putting off reading it for days, but now, as he sat there, it felt like the right moment. He clicked open the email. The first line sent a shiver through his spine. "We are thrilled to offer you a full scholarship to Stanford University, with a focus on renewable energy and sustainable technology." Malik read the email several times, each time feeling the weight of the words sink deeper into his chest. This was real. This was happening. He had to decide. He closed his eyes and thought of everything that had led him to this point, the struggles, the doubts, the moments of self-discovery. And then, he thought of the people who had been there for him, his mom, Mr. Johnson, Jasmine, and even the teachers who had pushed him when he didn't think he could go any further. When he opened his eyes again, he knew what he had to do. The next morning, Malik called Mr. Johnson. "I've made my decision," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I'm accepting the scholarship." Mr. Johnson's voice was warm and filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Malik. You've made a great choice. This is just the beginning." Malik smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in his life, he felt certain about his future. It wasn't going to be easy, nothing worth having ever was, but he was ready. Ready to take the next step, ready to leave behind the doubts, and ready to embrace the challenge that lay ahead. What does it feel like to stand on the edge of everything you've ever dreamed of? Malik sat back in his chair, staring out the window at the familiar sights of his hometown. Everything was about to change. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of change. He was ready to make it his own. Leaving home for Stanford was a decision that weighed heavily on Malik's heart, but the moment he stepped onto the campus, a strange sense of calm washed over him. The sprawling green lawns, the towering buildings, and the endless rows of students bustling about, everything seemed so far removed from the small town he had grown up in. Yet, as he walked through the gates, something inside him told him this was where he was meant to be. Malik's parents had driven him to California, his mom constantly offering words of encouragement and his dad keeping things light with jokes, trying to keep the mood fun and positive. But deep down, Malik could tell his parents were just as nervous as he was. They were proud, yes, but it was still a huge leap for their family, a leap that had never been imagined when Malik was younger. Once they arrived at the dorms, Malik's parents helped him unpack, making sure everything was in order. They tried not to show their sadness, but Malik could see it in their eyes. This wasn't just a goodbye for him, it was a goodbye for them too. Don't forget to call home, his mom reminded him, hugging him tightly. And remember, you've got this. I'm proud of you. Malik squeezed her back. I'll call every day, Mom. Don't worry. After the goodbyes, his parents left, and Malik was left standing alone in his new room. The dorm room was small, sparse, and barely furnished. It looked like every other college room, a single bed, a desk piled with textbooks, and a small dresser. But it was his now, and he felt a strange sense of pride as he sat down on the bed. This was it. No more hiding. No more being overlooked. Here, Malik could finally prove who he was, and more importantly, prove to himself that he belonged. The first few days were a blur of orientation events, meetings with academic advisors, and getting to know his roommates, two guys from different parts of the country who seemed to have their own lives figured out. Malik felt out of place at first. The other students were so confident, so sure of themselves, and they spoke with an ease that Malik envied. They were all excited about the future, about the opportunities that lay ahead. But Malik couldn't shake the feeling that he was still a step behind. What if they were smarter than him? What if they had more experience than him? But then, one afternoon, as he sat in the campus cafe working on an assignment, he noticed a familiar face. It was Jasmine. Her bright smile lit up the entire room as she waved at him from across the cafe. She was holding a stack of books, her usual energized self, but this time, there was something different about her. She was in a Stanford sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, and she was beaming. Malik, she said, her voice excited and genuine. You made it. This place is insane, huh? Malik grinned, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. Yeah, it's huge. I feel kind of lost. Jasmine pulled up a chair and sat down next to him. Trust me, we all feel that way. But you're going to be fine. You've already done something most people here only dream of. Winning the science fair, getting that scholarship, it's all proof of what you can do. Thanks, Malik said, his voice filled with gratitude. I don't know, Jasmine. Sometimes I feel like I'm just pretending to fit in. Like I don't really belong here. Jasmine leaned in, her eyes softening. That's just the imposter syndrome talking. You know you deserve to be here, right? You've worked hard for this. Don't let anyone, including yourself, make you doubt that. Malik looked at her, feeling a sudden burst of confidence. Jasmine had always been there for him, and now, as they sat together in this new place, it felt like a lifeline. Thanks, Malik said again, this time more assured. I needed to hear that. Jasmine smiled, flashing her signature grin. Anytime. We're in this together, remember? The following weeks were a whirlwind of classes, assignments, and social events. Malik found himself falling into a rhythm, though it was difficult at times. His professors were brilliant, and he quickly learned that everyone here was incredibly talented. The students in his renewable energy class were passionate and driven, and many of them had already conducted groundbreaking research. It was overwhelming. And yet, every time Malik began to doubt himself, he remembered Jasmine's words, "You've already done something most people here only dream of." One afternoon, Malik stayed late in the library, working on a group project for his environmental systems class. He was surrounded by papers, books, and notes, but his mind kept wandering. Was he really keeping up with the others? Was he really contributing enough to the project? Everyone else in his group seemed to be taking charge with ease. As he thought about the upcoming midterm and the pressure to perform, a voice interrupted his thoughts. Malik, right? Malik looked up to see one of his classmates standing at the edge of the table. It was Andrew, a tall guy with dark hair and glasses, someone Malik had seen around but hadn't really spoken to. Yeah, that's me, Malik replied, trying to sound casual. I'm in your group for environmental systems. I just wanted to say that I think your ideas for the renewable energy proposal are amazing. You really have a unique perspective. I think the rest of the team is lucky to have you. Malik blinked, surprised. You really think so? Andrew nodded, his expression earnest. Definitely. Don't sell yourself short. You've got some serious potential. I'm really excited to see what we come up with together. For a moment, Malik didn't know what to say. It wasn't just the compliment that threw him off, it was the genuine belief Andrew seemed to have in him. He was used to the skepticism, the doubt, even the mockery. But here, in this new environment, people seemed to see him differently. For the first time in a long while, Malik felt like he wasn't just existing, he was truly seen. That evening, Malik went for a walk around the campus to clear his mind. As he wandered past the science buildings, he stopped at a bench overlooking a quiet courtyard. The campus was beautiful, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. It was peaceful here, and for the first time in a while, Malik felt the weight of his worries lift, if only for a moment. What does it feel like to finally be seen for who you really are? He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had worked so hard to get here. He had spent years doubting his worth, trying to prove to the world, and to himself, that he wasn't invisible. Now, he was finally in a place where his ideas mattered, where his work was valued. And for the first time in a long time, he was starting to believe it. As Malik sat there, a new sense of purpose settled over him. He wasn't just here to survive. He was here to thrive. Stanford was everything Malik had imagined, and more. Every corner of the campus seemed to hold a new possibility. Each day brought fresh challenges, both academic and personal, but Malik was beginning to realize that these were not obstacles. They were opportunities to prove to himself that he truly belonged. The courses were rigorous. Malik found himself spending long hours in the library, buried in textbooks and scientific journals. His renewable energy class, in particular, was a challenge. The material was dense, and his classmates were brilliant. Some had internships at tech companies, others were already publishing research papers. Malik couldn't help but feel a little out of his depth at times. One evening, as he struggled to understand a particularly complex energy model in his textbook, he found himself growing frustrated. His mind had started to wander, he could feel the pressure mounting. Am I really cut out for this? He set his pencil down and rubbed his eyes, wishing for a break. The weight of the expectations, both his own and those of others, was beginning to feel too heavy. He was used to proving himself back home, but here, in this sea of prodigies, the stakes felt different. Every success here seemed to require even more effort than the last. As Malik stood up and walked over to the window, he saw the sun setting behind the tall trees lining the campus. The soft golden light illuminated the distant buildings, casting long shadows across the ground. It was beautiful, but it also reminded him just how small he felt in this vast new world. He felt a tap on his shoulder, and when he turned, he saw Jasmine standing in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said with a smile. Malik smiled back, grateful for the interruption. "Thanks. I'm about to lose it over this assignment." "Don't sweat it," Jasmine said, handing him a cup. "This stuff is tough. It's supposed to be. But it's not just the class," Malik admitted, taking a sip of the coffee. "It's everything. I feel like I'm drowning in expectations from the professors, my classmates, and honestly, from myself. I'm trying to keep up, but sometimes it feels like I don't even belong here." Jasmine walked over to the desk, sitting across from him. "I get it. I've been there, too. You think that everyone around you has it all figured out, and that you're the only one who doesn't." Malik nodded, his gaze drifting back to the window. "But you're not the only one," Jasmine continued. "And don't forget, there's a reason you're here. You've got the brains, and you've got the heart. You just have to remember why you started. All those hours you spent working on your science project, pushing through the doubts, this is no different. You've already proven what you're capable of. Malik looked at her, surprised by the honesty in her words. How do you always know what to say? Jasmine shrugged, her smile softening. I don't always know what to say. But I do know what it's like to doubt yourself, to wonder if you're good enough. I've been there, too. But then I remind myself, if I can make it this far, I'm already doing something right. For a moment, Malik didn't know what to say. Jasmine had always been a beacon of light in his life, but hearing her speak so honestly made him realize that even she had faced her own struggles. He wasn't alone in this journey. Thanks, Jasmine, he said, his voice quiet but sincere. I needed that. She smiled. Anytime. You're going to be fine. Trust me. The next day, Malik sat down in his renewable energy class with a renewed sense of purpose. He had spent the entire night going over the material that had confused him, and although he wasn't fully confident, he felt better about tackling the problem. As Professor Williams began the lecture, Malik's mind started to shift gears. He no longer felt overwhelmed. Instead, he focused on each part of the lecture as if it were a puzzle, something he could solve step by step. After class, Malik stayed behind to speak with Professor Williams. She was known for her strict standards, but Malik had always respected her ability to challenge students and push them beyond their limits. Professor Williams, Malik began, feeling slightly nervous, I wanted to ask about the assignment. I'm still struggling with the energy model, and I'm hoping you could clarify something for me. Professor Williams raised an eyebrow, but then smiled, her expression softening. I'm glad you're asking questions, Malik. Don't be afraid to struggle. It's a part of learning. Let me explain it in a different way. Come by my office hours this week, and we can go over it together. Malik's heart lifted. Just a few weeks ago, he would have never had the courage to ask for help. But here, at Stanford, he was learning to trust that asking questions wasn't a weakness. It was a way to grow. Thank you, Professor, Malik said, feeling grateful. I appreciate it. As Malik walked back to his dorm later that afternoon, he couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. The stress was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. With Jasmine's encouragement and Professor Williams' support, Malik was beginning to see a way forward. That evening, as he sat in his dorm room, Malik got a text from his mom. She'd been checking in regularly, and Malik was always happy to hear from her. Her messages had become a comfort, a reminder of home and the support that was waiting for him no matter where he was. Mom, how's everything going, Malik? I hope you're settling in. I'm so proud of you. Malik smiled, typing a quick response. Malik, it's going well. It's tough, but I'm figuring it out. Thanks for always supporting me. He hit send and leaned back in his chair, reflecting on how far he had come in such a short time. He wasn't the same nervous, unsure kid who had arrived just a few weeks ago. He had grown. The challenges were still there, but Malik knew he could face them now. As the days turned into weeks, Malik became more comfortable with the demanding pace of Stanford. He pushed through the moments of doubt, remembering the encouragement from those around him, especially Jasmine. And, little by little, he began to realize that the expectations weren't just a burden. They were proof of how far he had come. The hardest part wasn't the classes or the work, it was learning to believe in himself, to trust that he could handle whatever came next. How do you know when you've reached your limits? For Malik, the answer wasn't as simple as just pushing through. It was about recognizing when he needed help, when it was okay to struggle, and when to lean on those who cared about him. He hadn't figured it all out yet, but he was getting there. And that, he realized, was enough for now. As the semester continued, Malik's life at Stanford began to fall into a predictable rhythm. He had mastered the art of balancing his studies, social life, and personal growth, at least most of the time. He still struggled with self-doubt, but those moments were becoming less frequent. Each day, Malik was gaining more confidence in his ability to not just survive at Stanford, but to thrive. It was a late Tuesday evening when Malik received an email that would change everything. The subject line was simple but heavy with promise: Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge, sign up now. Malik had heard about the annual competition, but it wasn't until now that he realized how crucial it could be to his future. The challenge was open to all Stanford students, and it was an opportunity to showcase innovative solutions to real-world energy problems. Winning would mean a prestigious internship, the chance to work with groundbreaking experts, and an impressive addition to his resume. But the stakes weren't just academic. The competition represented something far more personal. This could be his chance to prove to everyone, but more importantly to himself, that he had what it took to succeed at the highest level. He'd always been the underdog, but here at Stanford, he had the chance to break that mold. Malik's heart raced as he read the email again. The application deadline was in 2 weeks, and the rules were simple: come up with an innovative solution to a global energy issue, present it to a panel of experts, and compete against other students from around the world. It was a massive challenge, but it was exactly what Malik needed. I have to do this, he thought. I can't pass up this opportunity. The next morning, Malik met Jasmine for coffee, and the first thing he did was tell her about the challenge. I'm thinking about entering, Malik said, taking a sip of his coffee. It could be my chance to finally make my mark. Jasmine looked impressed, her eyes lighting up. That's amazing. I think you should totally go for it. You've got the skills, the passion, and you've already proven you can handle this kind of pressure. I don't know, Malik said, his tone hesitant. What if I'm just not good enough? There's going to be some serious competition, and what if my idea doesn't stack up? Jasmine reached across the table, placing a hand on his. Malik, listen to me. You've already got a mind that's light years ahead of most people. Don't let fear hold you back. This is your shot to show the world what you can do. And if you don't take it, you'll always wonder what might have been. Malik stared at her for a moment, letting her words sink in. She was right. If he didn't take the chance, he might regret it for the rest of his life. I'm in, Malik said, determination creeping into his voice. I'm going to do it. That afternoon, Malik sat down in his dorm room and began brainstorming ideas for the competition. He knew he wanted to focus on renewable energy, specifically solar power, since it was an area he had studied intensely. But he needed something unique, something that would stand out among the thousands of other proposals. Hours passed as Malik sketched designs, jotted down ideas, and researched various technologies. The challenge was to create a solution that not only worked but could be implemented on a global scale. He thought about what he knew from his time at the science fair, the practical aspects of energy solutions that could work in underserved communities, where resources were scarce, and the need for sustainable energy was dire. A breakthrough moment came when Malik stumbled upon a concept, a solar-powered system designed to harvest both sunlight and ambient heat from the environment to generate energy. The system would be scalable, affordable, and could be used in areas where access to traditional energy grids was impossible. This could be it, Malik whispered to himself. He grabbed his notebook and started writing feverishly, developing the idea further, refining the technical details, and conceptualizing how it could change the world. He worked late into the night, only taking breaks when the exhaustion became too much to ignore. But with every idea he fleshed out, Malik felt more and more certain that this was his moment. The days leading up to the application deadline were a blur of hard work and sleepless nights. Malik barely slept, pouring all his energy into perfecting his proposal. He sought help from his professors when he needed guidance, consulted research papers, and even reached out to a few classmates for feedback. His teammates, though supportive, had their own projects and couldn't give him the help he really wanted, but Malik knew he had to go it alone. This was his dream, his chance to prove something. Finally, the day came when Malik hit submit. His heart pounded as he reviewed the final submission, his solar-powered hybrid system, a project he believed in with all his heart. It was innovative, practical, and exactly what the challenge needed. Malik sat back in his chair, looking at the screen as the confirmation email appeared. His stomach twisted with nerves, but deep down, he felt proud. Now, I just have to wait, he thought. A week later, Malik received another email, this one from the competition's judges. He opened it immediately, his fingers trembling as he read. Congratulations. Your proposal has been selected as a finalist in the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge. His heart skipped a beat. Malik had done it. He had made it through the first round. His idea was being recognized, and he was one step closer to the chance of a lifetime. Malik let out a deep breath, his body flooding with relief and excitement. The competition would now move to the presentation stage, where he would have to pitch his idea to a panel of experts and compete against the brightest minds from around the world. But Malik was ready. For the first time since arriving at Stanford, he truly believed in his own potential. The imposter syndrome had faded into the background, replaced by a sense of confidence he hadn't known he was capable of. That evening, Malik sat down on his bed and reflected on how far he had come. The boy who had once questioned whether he truly belonged at Stanford was now a finalist in a prestigious competition. He hadn't just survived, he had thrived. And he wasn't done yet. His journey was far from over, but for the first time in his life, Malik felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The challenge had just begun, and Malik was ready to rise to it. The next few days passed in a blur. After receiving the email confirming that he was a finalist in the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge, Malik's life had shifted into overdrive. His mind buzzed with excitement and nerves, and he barely had time to reflect on what he had already accomplished before the next challenge appeared in front of him. The real test was only beginning, the presentation. Stanford's competition was no small event. It was a chance for young innovators to showcase their work in front of influential industry leaders and professors from around the world. Winning could open doors Malik hadn't even dreamed of yet. But in order to stand out among the other finalists, Malik knew that his pitch would need to be perfect. Every free moment Malik had, he spent preparing. He worked on refining his presentation slides, made sure his concept was clear and compelling, and rehearsed his speech in front of the mirror over and over again. It wasn't enough to just have a good idea, he had to sell it. The pressure was immense. Jasmine was right there beside him, encouraging him every step of the way. "You've got this, Malik," she told him during one of their late-night study sessions. "You've put in the work. Now, just believe in yourself." Her words helped, but the nerves never quite went away. Malik wasn't just competing for a prize, he was competing for a future he'd always dreamed of but never dared to fully imagine. The day of the presentation arrived faster than Malik anticipated. He woke up early, feeling the weight of his nerves settle over him like a blanket. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and tried to calm his racing thoughts. His face looked tired, he hadn't been sleeping much lately, but he knew this was the moment that could change everything. After a quick breakfast, Malik grabbed his presentation folder, full of notes, diagrams, and the results of countless hours of research. He took one last deep breath before heading to the competition venue. When Malik arrived at the conference hall, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The room was filled with students from all over the world, each presenting their own innovative solutions to energy problems. The large room was lined with sleek podiums, where presenters stood nervously in front of digital screens displaying their ideas. The buzz of excitement and tension was palpable. Experts in renewable energy, technology, and innovation filled the room, eagerly awaiting the pitches. Malik's heart was pounding in his chest, but he focused on the task at hand. He knew that he had prepared for this moment. The knowledge he had gathered, the sleepless nights, and the countless hours spent perfecting his proposal had led to this. The idea, his hybrid solar system, was solid, it could change the way energy was harvested in remote areas. Now, he had to make everyone else see it. He was greeted by a volunteer at the entrance who handed him a badge. Malik smiled politely, though his palms were sweaty. He made his way to the side of the room where the finalists were gathered, each of them looking nervous but confident in their own way. It wasn't long before a voice echoed through the hall, announcing that the presentations would begin shortly. Malik took a seat in the back row and waited for his turn. He watched the other finalists present their ideas, each one more impressive than the last. Some projects involved cutting-edge solar technology, while others focused on wind energy or groundbreaking storage solutions. The competition was fierce. As he waited, Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. These were the brightest minds in the field, and he was standing shoulder to shoulder with them. Yet, despite the nerves, Malik felt a flicker of excitement. He had worked hard to get here, and he knew that this was his chance to make a real difference. Finally, it was his turn. Malik stood up, adjusting his jacket, and made his way to the front of the room. The eyes of the judges and audience were on him, and for a moment, he felt like the entire world had narrowed to the small podium in front of him. He took a deep breath and began. "Good afternoon," Malik began, his voice steady but firm. "My name is Malik Johnson, and I am here to present a solution to a problem that affects millions of people worldwide: energy access in underserved communities. My proposal is a scalable, hybrid solar energy system that not only harnesses sunlight, but also ambient heat from the environment to generate power, making it viable even in regions where sunlight is inconsistent." He clicked his remote, and the first slide appeared on the screen behind him. It was a detailed diagram of the system: 2 solar panels connected to heat-absorbing panels that could store and generate energy from both solar radiation and surrounding heat. By integrating 2 energy sources, we can overcome the limitations of traditional solar systems, especially in regions that experience fluctuations in sunlight or lack access to reliable energy infrastructure, Malik continued, his voice growing more confident. This system could be deployed in rural communities, providing an affordable, sustainable energy solution. It's not just about technology, it's about making a real, tangible difference in people's lives. He could feel the tension in the room, but it wasn't the kind that made him nervous. It was a focused, expectant kind of silence, the kind that comes from an audience that is paying attention. Malik spoke about the technology, how it worked, and its potential applications. He detailed the environmental benefits, the cost-effectiveness, and how it could be implemented in developing nations where energy poverty was a real issue. His ideas were ambitious, but they were also practical. The audience was quiet as he finished his pitch, and for a moment, Malik wondered if he had gone too far. But then he looked up at the judges' table. Their expressions were hard to read, but there was no denying the sense of intrigue in their eyes. The Q&A session that followed was intense. The judges asked about the technical details of the design, the feasibility of mass production, and the potential hurdles Malik would face in rolling out the system globally. Malik answered each question with clarity and precision, showing them that he had thought through every aspect of his proposal. When the session ended, Malik took a deep breath and stepped back from the podium. He had done it. He had given his all. The judges nodded and thanked him for his presentation, and Malik quickly returned to his seat. The weight of the moment was still heavy on his shoulders, but there was a sense of relief. He had given everything he had, and he knew that was all he could do. That evening, as Malik sat in his dorm room reflecting on the experience, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. It wasn't the outcome that mattered most, it was the journey, the growth, and the fact that he had the courage to take this step. Whatever happened next, Malik knew one thing for sure: he was ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The days after the presentation were the hardest. Malik found himself trapped in a cycle of anticipation, each minute feeling like an hour. It had been 2 days since he presented his proposal at the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge, and though he had given his all, the uncertainty was beginning to gnaw at him. Stanford's prestigious panel of judges had assured the finalists that they would be notified about the results in a week. But for Malik, 1 week felt like an eternity. He couldn't help but replay his presentation over and over again in his head, questioning if he had done enough, if he'd made the right points, or if he'd missed something crucial. What if I didn't do enough, he thought constantly. The self-doubt crept in, as it always did, especially when the stakes were high. But he reminded himself, again and again, that he had prepared to the best of his ability. He had stood there, in front of the brightest minds, and confidently explained a groundbreaking idea. That in itself was an accomplishment. Jasmine noticed his nervous energy. They had spent a few more late nights together, studying for their classes and talking through his feelings. She was there for him, as she always had been, offering words of encouragement and occasional distractions. She was Malik's anchor, and he appreciated her friendship more than ever in those tense days. One evening, as Malik sat hunched over his desk, scribbling in his notebook without really thinking about what he was writing, Jasmine entered his dorm room. "You're still at it, huh?" she asked with a smile, trying to ease the tension that seemed to radiate off him. Malik shrugged, pushing his notebook aside. "I just can't stop thinking about it. What if I'm not good enough?" "Malik," Jasmine said, pulling up a chair and sitting across from him. "Stop. You've already proven you're good enough. You did something not many people would even dare to try. You're here, and you're already a finalist. That's something." Malik looked at her, grateful for her unshakable faith in him. "You really think so?" "I know so," she replied, her voice steady and confident. Just then, Malik's phone buzzed on the desk, interrupting their conversation. He hesitated before picking it up, the anxiety almost suffocating him. He unlocked the phone, his heart racing as he saw the email subject, Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge, results announcement. His hands shook slightly as he opened the message, his breath catching in his throat. The email contained the answer he had been waiting for. "Dear Malik Johnson, we are pleased to inform you that your proposal has been selected as one of the top 3 winners in this year's Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge. We were incredibly impressed by your innovative solution, and we would like to invite you to present your project in a live-streamed global webinar next month. Congratulations on your well-deserved recognition." Malik's breath caught in his throat. His mind scrambled to process what he had just read. "Jasmine, look," he whispered, his voice barely audible. He handed her the phone, unable to find the words. Jasmine's eyes widened as she read the message, and she let out a loud, joyful gasp. "Malik, you did it. You're one of the winners. Oh my God, this is amazing." Malik sat back in his chair, his chest rising and falling with each shaky breath. I really did it," he murmured. "Yes, you did. You're a winner." The weight of the words took a moment to sink in. Malik was officially a winner in the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge. This was no longer just a dream or a hope, it was reality. His hybrid solar energy system was one of the most promising solutions, and the world would soon see it. For a moment, Malik allowed himself to savor the achievement. The long nights, the stress, the doubts, it had all paid off. But in the back of his mind, another realization began to dawn on him. "This is just the beginning, right?" Malik asked softly, more to himself than to Jasmine. She nodded, a grin on her face. "Exactly. This is just the start of something big. You've got a lot of people who will be paying attention to what you do next. So, don't stop now. You've earned your place here." The days following the announcement were filled with excitement, but also an overwhelming sense of responsibility. Malik was going to be presenting his project on a global stage. He was now part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The pressure to perform was mounting, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about representing his vision, his community, and his future. He started preparing for the global webinar immediately. The organizers had given him detailed instructions for his next presentation, which would be streamed to thousands of people around the world. He'd have just 10 minutes to present his project again, but this time, he had to deliver it even more powerfully. Malik knew he couldn't afford to just be good. He had to be great. He spent countless hours fine-tuning his presentation, adjusting his visuals, and rehearsing his speech. Every sentence, every gesture had to be perfect. He even practiced in front of a few of his professors and peers for feedback. They were impressed, but Malik knew he still had work to do. He was on the cusp of something huge, but it was clear that the hardest part was still ahead of him. As the webinar day approached, Malik's anxiety grew. He was nervous about the global audience, the panel of industry experts, and the pressure to deliver a perfect pitch. But every time the self-doubt crept in, he reminded himself of everything he had already overcome. He wasn't just a kid from a disadvantaged background anymore. He wasn't just a finalist, he was a winner, and now, the world was going to know his name. On the day of the global webinar, Malik dressed carefully, choosing a simple, sharp outfit that made him feel confident. He logged into the platform early, making sure his technology was working. His heart beat loudly in his chest as the minutes ticked by, and when the event finally began, Malik was ready. The moment had arrived. As he waited for his turn to present, he looked around at the other participants, all of them eager to showcase their ideas. But as Malik watched them, he felt a calmness settle over him. This was his moment, and he was going to take it. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and whispered to himself, "I've got this." The screen in front of him flashed, and the host announced his name. Malik took one last look at the camera and began. Malik's heart raced as he stood before the camera, adjusting his tie one last time. The live-streamed global webinar was now underway, and he was moments away from presenting his innovative renewable energy solution to an audience that spanned continents. His pulse quickened, but as he took a deep breath, something within him clicked. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the culmination of years of hard work and sleepless nights. He could already hear the soft hum of activity from the virtual platform, the other finalists nervously waiting their turns, the technical team in the background, and the quiet murmur of an international audience awaiting their ideas. It was both humbling and exhilarating. Malik had always dreamed of being part of something bigger than himself, but now he was living it. He stood in front of the virtual podium, his slides ready, his notes in hand. The host's voice echoed in his earpiece, reminding him that his presentation would last only 10 minutes, followed by a Q&A session with the global panel of experts. "Malik, you're up next. Just breathe. You've got this," Jasmine's voice echoed in his mind. She had been with him every step of the way, even from miles away, providing him with the strength to believe in himself when doubts crept in. The host's voice came through the earpiece again, signaling that it was his time. "And now, we'll hear from Malik Johnson, the winner of the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge. Malik, the stage is yours." Malik nodded to himself. His hands were trembling slightly, but he steadied them by gripping the edge of the podium. He smiled into the camera, briefly glancing at his slides before beginning. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malik Johnson, and I'm honored to present to you today a solution that could help millions of people gain access to reliable and sustainable energy. As someone who grew up in a community where access to electricity was a luxury, I know firsthand the impact that energy can have on a person's life." Malik paused, allowing his words to sink in. He wasn't just giving a presentation, he was telling his story, one that he knew would resonate with many in the audience. He wanted them to understand why this mattered. "Energy access is not a privilege, it's a basic need," he continued. "But for people in remote and underserved communities, it can be a distant dream. Today, I'm here to introduce a scalable, hybrid solar energy system that integrates both solar power and ambient heat harvesting to provide a reliable, sustainable energy source, no matter where you live." As Malik spoke, he advanced the slides behind him, showing the detailed diagrams of his hybrid system. The audience remained silent, watching intently. Malik's voice grew more confident with each word as he explained the technology behind his solution. The system works by combining solar panels with heat-absorbing panels that can capture and store ambient heat from the environment, providing a continuous power source even in regions with inconsistent sunlight. This hybrid approach means that the system is not only energy efficient, but also adaptable to varying environmental conditions. He could sense the attention in the room, the curiosity from the audience. He wasn't just talking about a theoretical idea anymore, he was presenting something tangible, something that could change lives. Malik continued to describe the versatility of the system, how it could be deployed in both rural and urban areas, and how it would bring affordable energy to communities that had long been without it. He emphasized the potential environmental benefits, from reduced carbon emissions to a lower reliance on fossil fuels. The ultimate goal, Malik said, is to create a self-sustaining, renewable energy ecosystem that empowers individuals, families, and entire communities to take control of their energy needs. This system is not just a product, it's a solution to the energy crisis that will drive long-term sustainability for future generations. As he neared the end of his presentation, Malik took a final, steadying breath. This was it. This was his pitch, the one that could change everything. The future of energy is not just in the hands of corporations or governments, he concluded. It's in the hands of the people who need it the most. And with this technology, we can bring them the power they deserve. Thank you. There was a brief moment of silence as Malik finished speaking, the weight of his words hanging in the air. And then, the virtual audience erupted into applause. Malik blinked, stunned by the response. Though he couldn't hear the clapping, he could feel the energy of the moment. This was real. This was happening. As the applause faded, the host thanked Malik for his presentation and turned to the panel of judges for their feedback. Malik's heart continued to race as the panelists, each an expert in renewable energy or technology, began their questions. The first judge, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a leading environmental scientist from Spain, spoke up. Malik, this is an incredibly innovative approach. I'm particularly impressed by the way you've integrated heat harvesting with solar power. However, I have a question about the scalability of your design. What would it take to manufacture and deploy these systems on a global scale, particularly in regions with limited infrastructure? Malik nodded, grateful for the thoughtful question. That's a great point, Dr. Rodriguez. My team and I have considered the challenges of scalability, and we've designed the system with modularity in mind. It's designed to be easily scalable in both small and large installations. The components are lightweight, durable, and can be produced using local materials in many regions, making it cost-effective for large-scale deployment. The panel nodded, impressed with Malik's answer. Another judge, Professor Daniel Carter, a professor of engineering at MIT, chimed in. I agree with Dr. Rodriguez. This system could revolutionize energy access, but what about long-term maintenance and the sustainability of these systems? How will you ensure that communities continue to benefit from this technology in the years to come? Malik smiled, knowing he had anticipated this question. That's an important consideration. We've designed the system with easy maintenance in mind, and we've partnered with local communities to provide training on installation and upkeep. This approach ensures that communities are not just passive recipients of technology, they become active participants in maintaining and evolving the system. The questions continued, and Malik answered each one with confidence, his knowledge of the project shining through. By the time the Q&A session ended, Malik felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had not only shared his vision, but he had also demonstrated the practicality and potential of his idea. After the webinar, Malik felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had done his best, but now all he could do was wait for the results. The feedback had been overwhelmingly positive, but the competition was fierce, and Malik knew that anything could happen. Jasmine reached out to him afterward, as she always did. You were incredible, Malik. I'm so proud of you. Malik smiled, leaning back in his chair. Thanks, Jasmine. I couldn't have done it without you. Now, the waiting game had begun again. But this time, Malik wasn't as anxious. He had done everything he could. The ball was now in the court of the judges, and whatever happened next, he knew that he had made an impact. The next few days were a whirlwind for Malik. The global webinar had been a huge success, and his phone buzzed non-stop with messages of congratulations. His classmates at Stanford, professors, and even strangers from across the globe reached out to commend him for his innovative energy solution. The applause from the live-streamed audience had felt electrifying, and it was clear that Malik had made a lasting impression on the renewable energy community. Still, despite all the praise and excitement, Malik couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of uncertainty. He had given everything he had in that presentation, but now, there was nothing left to do except wait. He tried to distract himself with schoolwork, but his thoughts constantly wandered back to the upcoming results. The pressure was mounting. Winning would change everything for him, his future, his community, and potentially the world. The results of the competition were due to be announced in just 3 days. But Malik wasn't prepared for the twist that would come. It all started with a strange email late one evening. Subject: urgent, clarification needed regarding your submission. Malik frowned as he opened the message. At first glance, it appeared to be from the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge organizers, but it didn't seem to be the congratulatory message he had been waiting for. Dear Malik Johnson, we hope this message finds you well. Following your recent presentation, we noticed a potential issue with your submitted materials. There seems to be a discrepancy between the information provided in your proposal and some of the technical details included in your presentation. We kindly ask that you clarify the following. 1. The efficiency rating of your hybrid system. 2. The projected cost of manufacturing the system at scale. 3. The anticipated environmental impact. We appreciate your immediate attention to this matter and kindly ask that you provide the requested information by no later than 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Failure to submit the clarification could result in disqualification. Malik's stomach dropped as he read the email a second time. His mind raced. Disqualification? He had double-checked his materials before submitting them. Could there have been an error? His presentation had been flawless. He had gone over the technical details countless times with his mentors. How could something have slipped through the cracks? Panic began to rise in his chest. He called Jasmine immediately. Jazz, you're not going to believe this, he said, voice trembling with frustration and fear. There's an issue with my submission. They say there's a discrepancy in the technical details of my proposal. They want me to clarify everything by tomorrow noon. Jasmine was silent for a moment, clearly processing the weight of what Malik had said. That's strange, she finally replied. But Malik, you've worked too hard to let something like this get in the way. You've got 1 day to fix this, so let's just focus on what they need from you. Malik nodded, though he didn't feel very confident. The clock was ticking, and he didn't know where to begin. He knew that every minute mattered. I'm going to look over everything. I'll go over my proposal with a fine-tooth comb and see if I missed something, Malik said, trying to steady his voice. But this could seriously mess everything up. You've got this, Jasmine reassured him. You've worked this hard, you can fix this. Let's get to work. Malik spent the next several hours locked in his dorm room, poring over every single page of his proposal, every slide from his presentation, every chart and graph. The more he searched, the more his frustration grew. He didn't find anything obviously wrong with the numbers, but the email kept running through his mind. What was the discrepancy they were talking about? What could he have possibly missed? By the time morning came, Malik was running on little sleep, but he had a clearer sense of the potential issue. His project's cost analysis section was based on estimates he had gathered from several different sources, but in the final stages of his presentation, he had made a last-minute adjustment to the numbers. His professors had reviewed it and given him the green light, but perhaps the changes hadn't been as precise as they needed to be. He quickly prepared a more detailed breakdown of the numbers and technical specifications to send back to the organizers. There was no room for error. If he didn't submit this information, his spot in the competition could be at risk. At 11:45 a.m., Malik hit send on the email with a detailed explanation of the adjustments he had made. He felt like he was on the verge of collapse, but he knew he had done everything he could. He took a deep breath and slumped back in his chair. The rest of the day dragged by in a haze. Malik barely remembered attending his classes or meeting with his professors. His mind kept replaying the events of the past few days, the excitement of his initial success, the anxiety of the correction request, and the nervous waiting for a response. All he could do now was wait for a reply. At around 4:30 p.m., his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a notification he was expecting. It was a call from an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" Malik answered, his voice uncertain. "Malik, it's Dr. Stevens from the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge team. I just wanted to confirm that we received your email and your updated submission," the voice on the other end of the line said. Malik's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, I sent it in earlier today. Is everything okay?" Dr. Stevens hesitated for a moment before replying, "Well, Malik, that's what we need to talk about. After reviewing your updated submission and consulting with the panel, we found that the discrepancies in your proposal were much more serious than initially thought." Malik's blood ran cold. "What? What do you mean? We have reason to believe that your submission was not entirely original and may have been based on an existing project that was already submitted to another competition last year. We need to investigate this further." The world seemed to tilt beneath Malik's feet. His mind raced. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as Dr. Stevens' words echoed in his ears. His stomach clenched in disbelief. Not original? Based on another project? Malik had poured his heart and soul into this project, and now, in an instant, everything was in jeopardy. "Dr. Stevens," Malik said, his voice shaking, "this is a mistake. I've worked so hard for this, and this idea, it's mine. Every part of it is mine. I swear. I'm afraid we'll need to look into this matter further before we can proceed with your submission," Dr. Stevens replied, his tone grave. "We'll be in touch soon." And with that, the call ended. Malik sat there in stunned silence, his phone still pressed to his ear, unable to believe what he had just heard. His future, his dreams, everything he had worked for was on the line. He had to clear his name, but how could he prove something like that? How could he fight against such an accusation? Malik's mind raced as the room seemed to close in around him. The accusation was something he hadn't expected, not in his wildest dreams. He stared at his phone for a long time after the call ended, unable to make sense of what had just transpired. How could anyone think his idea wasn't original? This had been his vision, his passion, and his work from the very beginning. He had poured everything into this project. It was his future, his shot at making a difference, and now, it felt as if it was slipping through his fingers. The accusation wasn't just an attack on his work, it was an attack on everything he believed in. The energy system he had designed had been born from his experiences, his background, and his deep desire to solve real-world problems. How could anyone suggest it was based on something else? Malik needed answers. He could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. If he didn't resolve this, his academic career, his reputation, and the entire renewable energy project could be destroyed. Everything he had worked for, the thousands of hours spent in the lab, the sleepless nights researching, the constant rejections, all of it could come crashing down because of a misunderstanding. His first instinct was to call Jasmine. She had been with him every step of the way, and he needed her advice now more than ever. "Jazz, I don't know what to do," Malik said when she picked up the phone, his voice tinged with desperation. "They're accusing me of plagiarism. They think my project isn't original, that it's based on something else." Jasmine was silent for a moment, clearly shocked by what Malik had just said. "Wait, what? That's insane, Malik. You've been working on this idea for years. What are they saying?" "They said they think it was based on a project that was submitted to another competition last year." "But that's not true, Jazz. This idea, the hybrid solar system, it's mine. I've been developing it since high school. I've never seen anything like this." Jasmine's voice became steady, a familiar confidence replacing the shock. "Malik, you need to fight this. You have to show them your process, all of it. If they think it's based on someone else's work, you need to prove them wrong. Malik took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. How am I supposed to do that? They've already called it into question. I don't even know where to start. You have the research, Malik, Jasmine said firmly. All of it. The notes, the early drafts, the emails with your professors, your sketches from high school. You have proof of how this evolved. It's not just about the idea, it's about showing them the journey you've been on to get here. Show them the process, how you've always been working on this. You've got to bring them every piece of evidence that proves it's yours. Malik nodded, though it felt like his head was spinning. Jasmine was right, of course. He had all that documentation. The emails, the early prototype designs, the sketches, the hours of brainstorming sessions with his professors, all of it was proof that this idea was his from the start. But the question still gnawed at him, would it be enough? Okay, Malik said, his voice more determined now. I'll gather everything. I'm not going down without a fight. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Malik rifled through old notebooks, digging out designs and sketches he had made years ago. He found the first email he had sent to his high school science teacher, asking for advice on the solar panel concept. He found the drafts of his proposal, the revisions he had made with his professors over the years. Every document he could find, every email, every idea he had ever jotted down, he gathered in one place. Jasmine helped, of course. She knew Malik's process as well as anyone, and she had been there since the beginning. Together, they pieced together a timeline of his work, highlighting every important moment, every decision, every conversation that led to the creation of his hybrid solar energy system. At the end of it all, Malik sat back, staring at the piles of evidence on his desk. Was this enough? Would the judges be convinced? Could he really prove that his work was original? He had to. There was no other option. This wasn't just about a competition anymore, this was about everything he had worked for. The next morning, Malik sent the package of evidence to Dr. Stevens and the competition team, detailing the entire process that led to the development of his system. He explained the early stages of his research, the inspiration he had drawn from his community's energy struggles, and the collaboration he had with his professors at Stanford. He included photos of his old sketches, emails with teachers, and even pictures of the first rough prototypes he had built in his garage. He also attached a personal letter, written with all the sincerity and passion he had left in him. Subject: clarification and evidence regarding originality of my submission. Dear Dr. Stevens and the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge team. I understand the concern regarding the originality of my project, and I want to assure you that the hybrid solar energy system I presented is entirely my own work. This concept has been years in the making, and I have carefully documented every step of my process from the very beginning. Attached, you will find the original concept sketches and notes from my high school years. Emails exchanged with my high school science teacher, who first encouraged me to pursue renewable energy. Early drafts of my proposal, which were reviewed and edited by several professors at Stanford. Photographs of my initial prototype, created in my garage. A timeline of the project's development, showing the progression of my idea and the research behind it. This project is deeply personal to me. It stems from my experiences growing up in a community where access to reliable energy was a challenge, and I have dedicated myself to solving that problem. I hope the attached evidence can demonstrate the originality of my work and clarify any misunderstandings. I would be happy to discuss this further if needed and am available at your earliest convenience. Thank you for your understanding and for your continued consideration of my submission. Sincerely. Malik Johnson. Malik hit send and exhaled a long, shaky breath. Now, it was in the hands of the competition organizers. He couldn't change anything else. He had done everything he could to prove his innocence, to show that the work was his own, and to restore his integrity. It felt like the longest wait of his life. Days passed in a blur, and Malik tried to stay focused on his studies, but his mind kept drifting back to the competition. The email had been sent, but would it be enough? Then, on the third day, Malik's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call, it was an email from Dr. Stevens. Subject: Response to your submission clarification. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he opened the email. Dear Malik, thank you for the prompt submission of your clarification and the supporting materials. After careful review of your documentation and discussions with the panel, we are pleased to inform you that we have found no evidence to suggest that your submission was based on any existing projects. We are satisfied with the clarification you have provided and have decided to continue considering your project for the competition. We appreciate your transparency and dedication to the process, and we apologize for the confusion caused by this matter. We look forward to seeing your continued progress and wish you the best of luck in the upcoming stages of the competition. Sincerely, Dr. Stevens. Malik read the email again, unable to believe it. His heart surged with relief. He had won. He had proven himself. Malik leaned back in his chair, staring at the email in disbelief. It was over. After days of doubt, anxiety, and uncertainty, he had been cleared. The competition team had accepted his clarification and decided to continue considering his project. He could hardly believe it, but there it was, in black and white, his submission was legitimate, and his hard work had paid off. He let out a long sigh of relief and ran a hand through his hair. The weight that had been pressing on his shoulders for days finally lifted, but the victory was bittersweet. Malik knew that he still had a long way to go, this was just one hurdle in a much larger race. Jasmine had been waiting for his call, knowing that he'd be anxiously checking his email. As soon as Malik saw her name flash on the screen, he answered. Jazz, Malik said, his voice shaking slightly with excitement, they accepted it. I'm in. Jasmine's voice exploded with joy on the other end. No way. That's amazing, Malik. I knew you had it in you. I'm so proud of you. Malik smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you. You were right, showing them my process, my journey, it made all the difference. Jasmine's voice softened. Of course. You worked so hard for this. You deserve to have your voice heard, and they need to see how much you've put into this. Now, all that's left is to finish strong. Malik nodded, the truth of her words sinking in. He had cleared this first major hurdle, but there was still so much more to do. The competition wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The following weeks flew by in a blur. With his place in the competition secured, Malik dove back into refining his hybrid solar system. His professors at Stanford, the ones who had supported him throughout the journey, offered their guidance as he made adjustments and improvements. The competition's next round would require him to submit a fully working prototype, and Malik knew that the stakes had just gotten higher. Every day, he spent hours in the lab, testing different configurations, fine-tuning the energy output, and working with his team of researchers. There were setbacks, of course, some experiments didn't work as planned, and there were moments of frustration when things didn't go the way he had hoped. But Malik pushed through. He couldn't afford to lose sight of the bigger picture. This was his chance to prove that his project could change the world. In the meantime, the attention surrounding his work only grew. Malik had gone viral after his global webinar presentation, and now, every time he opened his inbox, he was greeted with messages from potential investors, environmental advocates, and journalists wanting to learn more about his solar system. Some were interested in the technology itself, while others saw the potential for collaboration. Malik couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things were moving. Just months ago, he had been a student with an idea, and now, he was at the center of a global conversation about the future of energy. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on him. The competition was only getting more intense. There were other brilliant minds out there, all vying for the same recognition. But Malik's mind kept coming back to one thing, his community. This project wasn't just about winning a prize. It was about providing real solutions for people who had been struggling for access to clean, affordable energy. He could see it now, the homes powered by his hybrid solar systems, the schools with constant electricity, the businesses thriving thanks to a reliable energy source. His vision was bigger than just a competition. It was a movement. As the final submission deadline approached, Malik's excitement began to bubble over. There were moments of doubt, of course, but he'd learned to quiet those voices. He had put in the work, and now it was time to see it through to the end. Then, just days before the final submission was due, Malik received another unexpected call. This time, it was from one of the judges of the competition, Dr. Clara Baines, a well-respected figure in the renewable energy field. She had been following Malik's progress with great interest and wanted to discuss his project further. "Hello, Malik," Dr. Baines said when he picked up the phone. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "No, not at all," Malik replied, trying to contain his excitement. "What's going on?" "I've been reviewing your project, and I have to say, I'm impressed," Dr. Baines said. "The hybrid solar energy system you've developed has real potential. However, there's a question I've been meaning to ask you, something that could take your project to the next level." Malik's curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "Your system's energy efficiency is impressive, but there's a way to scale it even further. Have you considered integrating a more advanced storage solution? I'm talking about using next-generation battery technology to increase storage capacity while reducing cost. This could be the breakthrough that makes your system truly game-changing." Malik's eyes widened. This was the kind of feedback he had been hoping for. "I hadn't considered it, but that's exactly what I need to make this project more viable. Do you have any recommendations for where I should start?" Dr. Baines smiled through the phone. "I thought you'd say that. I'll send over a few papers and resources to help guide you. I believe your system is on the right track, but adding this element could push it into the realm of widespread commercial use." After the call, Malik wasted no time in researching the new technology Dr. Baines had suggested. He spent the next few days reading papers, attending webinars, and meeting with experts in battery technology. With Jasmine by his side, he made the necessary adjustments to his system, integrating a cutting-edge storage solution that he was sure would make a huge difference. It was a gamble. The changes were significant, and he knew he was working under a tight deadline. But as he looked at his updated prototype, Malik felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just a competition. This was his chance to make a real, lasting impact. The final submission was submitted, and Malik crossed his fingers, hoping that the judges would appreciate the changes he had made. As the announcement day drew near, Malik continued to work tirelessly, keeping his focus on his mission. Whether he won the competition or not, he knew that this was just the beginning of his journey. The world was paying attention now, and no matter the outcome, Malik was determined to use this opportunity to make a difference. Malik stared at his phone, checking the time for what felt like the 100th time in the last few hours. The announcement for the winner of the competition was just a day away. It felt surreal. After everything he'd been through, the accusations, the doubt, the pressure, it was finally coming down to this. The energy in the Stanford Innovation Center, where the competition was being held, was palpable. The entire campus buzzed with excitement. Fellow competitors, professors, students, and even industry leaders gathered for the final showcase, eagerly anticipating the outcome. Malik found himself standing in front of his booth, the prototype of his hybrid solar system humming quietly beside him. The display was sleek and professional, showcasing not only the technical aspects of his work but also its potential impact on the world. Jasmine had stayed by his side every step of the way. She'd been with him through the sleepless nights, the frustrating setbacks, and the tense moments when he thought he might not make it. Now, she stood beside him, offering quiet support. "You've got this," Jasmine said, her voice calm but filled with confidence. "You've put in the work, Malik. This is your moment." Malik smiled at her. "I know. It's just, hard to believe it's all coming to an end. Whether I win or not, this project has already changed everything for me." Jasmine nodded, her gaze turning toward the other booths where competitors were presenting their projects. "It's not just about the win. It's about what comes after. You've already shown the world your potential." Malik nodded in agreement. He had to admit, the journey had been far more than he had imagined when he first started. When he thought about his humble beginnings, growing up in a community with limited access to electricity, it felt like a lifetime ago. Now, standing on the verge of changing the world, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. His vision was becoming a reality. As the time for the announcement drew nearer, Malik felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. The judges had already toured the booths, scrutinizing the projects and asking questions. They had been impressed by Malik's work so far, but he knew that there were still so many unknowns. Would they see the potential in his project? Would they understand the larger mission behind his innovation? Then, just as the clock struck 6 p.m., the lights dimmed, and the crowd gathered for the final announcement. Malik's heart pounded in his chest as he stood among the other finalists, his hands slightly shaking. He tried to focus on his breathing, but the anticipation was too much to ignore. Dr. Stevens took the stage to announce the winner. The room went silent, everyone waiting with bated breath. "It has been an incredible journey to this point," Dr. Stevens began, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We've seen some of the brightest minds present groundbreaking innovations that have the potential to change the future of energy. And now, after careful deliberation, it's time to announce the winner of the Stanford Renewable Energy Challenge." Malik felt his palms sweating. His throat was dry, and he could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. He glanced over at Jasmine, who smiled reassuringly, as if to say, "No matter what happens, this is just the beginning." "And the winner is Malik Johnson, for his groundbreaking hybrid solar energy system." Malik's heart skipped a beat. The crowd erupted in applause as Malik's name was called. His legs felt like they were made of jelly as he walked up to the stage, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He could barely process what was happening. All he could think about was the moment when he had first come up with the idea, his dream to help his community, and how far he had come since then. As he stood before the judges and the audience, holding the trophy, Malik realized that the competition had never been just about winning. It had been about the journey, the knowledge he had gained, and the people he had met along the way. After the ceremony, Malik stood alone outside, the cool evening air wrapping around him like a blanket. He took a deep breath, trying to ground himself. It had been such an intense ride, but now, in this quiet moment, he finally felt a sense of peace. He had done it. "Hey," Jasmine's voice broke through his thoughts. She had stepped outside to join him. "You did it, Malik. You really did it." Malik smiled, his exhaustion giving way to a quiet joy. "We did it, Jazz. I couldn't have gotten here without you." Jasmine beamed, her pride in him evident. "You've earned this. I'm so proud of you." Malik looked at the trophy in his hands, and then, with a smile, he placed it in Jasmine's hands. "This is for you too. You've been with me through everything, this is just as much yours as it is mine." Jasmine shook her head, laughing. "You're the one who did the work. This is your victory, Malik. But I'll hold on to it for a while." She winked at him, and they both laughed. For the first time in a long while, Malik felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The road ahead would be long, filled with more challenges and obstacles. But he had crossed a significant milestone, and that alone was worth celebrating. Later that night, as Malik sat in his dorm room, reflecting on everything that had led him to this point, a new wave of realization washed over him. He had started this journey with a single idea, a desire to change the world, to make energy accessible to people who needed it the most. He had faced doubts, accusations, and setbacks, but now, his project had been validated by some of the most influential figures in the renewable energy field. He thought about his community, about the families and businesses who had struggled for access to reliable power. His dream was no longer just a dream, it was becoming a reality. The hybrid solar system he had created could help them, and it was only the beginning. Malik picked up his phone and sent a quick text to his mother. "We did it, Mom. The project's a success. I'm one step closer to making a difference." He paused for a moment, waiting for her response. When it came, her reply brought tears to his eyes. "I always knew you would, Malik. You were born to change the world." Malik leaned back in his chair, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. This was just the beginning. There were still more challenges to face, more hurdles to overcome, and more dreams to realize. But one thing was certain, he was ready. And the world was finally ready to listen. Malik's phone buzzed in his pocket as he walked through the crowded Stanford campus, the warm California sun shining down on him. He pulled the phone out and saw a message from Dr. Clara Baines, one of the judges who had taken a special interest in his project. "Malik, congratulations again on your win. Your work is impressive, and I believe it has the potential to change the energy landscape. Let's set up a meeting. I want to discuss next steps with you." Malik's heart raced. He had known that his victory in the competition was just the beginning, but now it felt like the real work was about to start. The opportunity to meet with Dr. Baines, a leader in renewable energy, was a golden ticket. He quickly responded. "Thank you, Dr. Baines. I'm thrilled about the opportunity. When would be a good time to meet?" He didn't have to wait long for her reply. "Let's schedule something for next week. How about Monday afternoon? I'll have some time to go over the next phase with you." Malik agreed without hesitation. It was time to take the next step in his journey. The days leading up to the meeting passed in a blur. Malik continued refining his solar system prototype, tweaking small aspects of the design to improve its efficiency. He was determined to make sure everything was perfect before meeting with Dr. Baines. But even as he worked, his mind kept drifting to what lay ahead. This was the moment when everything could change. If Dr. Baines liked his system, it could open doors to funding, collaborations, and partnerships that could make his project a household name. Malik knew he had the skills and the vision, but now he needed the right people to believe in him. Jasmine could see the weight of it all on Malik's shoulders. She'd been with him every step of the way, but she knew that this was a pivotal moment. As they sat together one evening, going over his notes, she spoke up. "You're not alone in this, Malik," she said softly. "You've already proven that you can do this. Don't let the pressure get to you." Malik smiled, appreciating her constant support. "I know. I just feel like this meeting with Dr. Baines could be everything. If this goes well, I could have the resources to turn my project into something real. Something that could help so many people." Jasmine nodded. "Exactly. But remember, no matter what happens, this is just the beginning. You've already accomplished so much. Don't forget that." Monday afternoon arrived, and Malik found himself standing outside the conference room at Dr. Baines' office. His palms were clammy, his heart beating a little faster than usual. He had been preparing for this meeting for weeks, but now that it was finally here, he couldn't shake the feeling of nervous excitement. He took a deep breath and knocked on the door. "Come in," came Dr. Baines' voice from inside. He entered the room to find Dr. Baines sitting at a large desk, papers and energy reports scattered around her. Her smile was warm, welcoming. "Malik, it's great to finally meet you in person," she said, standing up to shake his hand. "Congratulations again on your victory. Your project has impressed many people in the field, including myself." Malik's nerves started to ease slightly. She wasn't just a judge in a competition, she was a respected authority in renewable energy. To hear that she was impressed meant more than just a win, it meant that he was on the right path. "Thank you, Dr. Baines. I really appreciate the opportunity to meet with you. I've been working on the system for a while now, but I know there's still so much more to do. That's why I wanted to talk to you, Dr. Baines replied, gesturing for him to take a seat. What you've done is remarkable, but I see potential for even more. Your solar system could be a game changer in the industry, but it needs more support. Financial backing, access to the right networks, and maybe even some real-world testing. I believe you're on the cusp of something big. Malik sat back, absorbing her words. His heart raced again, but this time, it was with hope. I'm open to any suggestions or feedback. I've been refining the design, but I know there are still challenges to overcome. Dr. Baines nodded. Exactly. The technology you've created is solid, but to scale it to the level it needs to be, we're talking about large manufacturing processes, distribution, and reaching communities in need. You need a partner who can not only fund this but also help you navigate the complexities of turning an idea into a widespread solution. Malik's mind spun. Are you suggesting that? Yes, Dr. Baines said, her voice steady. I think it's time you look into partnership opportunities. There are a few venture capital firms and renewable energy companies I could connect you with. They would be eager to hear about your work. But this won't be easy, it'll require you to refine your pitch, prepare for high-stakes negotiations, and be ready to face some tough questions. But if you're serious about this, you need to be prepared. Malik felt his stomach flip. I'm ready. I've always known this would be a huge challenge, but it's the one I'm willing to take on. Dr. Baines smiled. That's what I like to hear. In fact, I've already made some calls. There's a renewable energy summit coming up in a few months, and I think this would be the perfect place to introduce you to some key players in the field. It'll be your chance to pitch your project, get feedback, and, hopefully, secure the partnerships that will take your system to the next level. Malik felt a surge of gratitude and excitement. This was the break he had been hoping for, the moment that could change everything. Thank you, Dr. Baines. I can't tell you how much this means to me. I'll do whatever it takes to make this work. Good, she said, standing up and extending her hand. I believe in your vision, Malik. Now it's time to take it to the next level. As Malik left Dr. Baines' office, he felt like he was walking on air. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the challenges were only going to get bigger. But for the first time in a long time, he felt ready. He had the backing of a respected mentor, the attention of key industry players, and most importantly, he had the belief in his own potential. The hybrid solar system was more than just a project now, it was a movement, a chance to change the world. And Malik Johnson was just getting started. The days following his meeting with Dr. Baines felt like a blur. Malik had more meetings, more paperwork, and more decisions to make than he ever thought possible. His once quiet college life had now been replaced with a whirlwind of preparation for the upcoming Renewable Energy Summit, the same event Dr. Baines had mentioned as his big break. Each day, he worked tirelessly, refining his pitch, perfecting his prototype, and learning everything he could about the renewable energy industry's current landscape. Every night, he'd return to his dorm, exhausted, but unable to sleep. His mind raced with ideas, possibilities, and, if he was honest, fears. Would he really be able to convince these powerful industry leaders that his idea was worth their time and resources? Jasmine, ever the rock, was there by his side, making sure he stayed grounded. During their late-night study sessions, she kept reminding him to take breaks, to breathe, and not to overwork himself. You've got this, she'd say, her usual confidence now a calming presence. No one else could have brought this idea this far but you. One evening, as they sat in their usual spot on the campus lawn, Malik couldn't help but voice his anxieties. What if I freeze up, Jasmine? What if they don't think I'm ready? What if they don't believe in the project? She shook her head, her eyes softening. You're ready, Malik. You've been ready for this moment since the beginning. You've done the hard work, and you've got the passion. It's all about believing in what you're doing, not about impressing anyone else. Malik let out a deep breath, his shoulders relaxing for the first time that day. You always know how to put things in perspective. I'm your biggest fan, Malik. Just remember why you're doing this. It's not just about the competition or the summit, it's about making a real difference. The days before the summit were a blur of meetings with potential partners and advisors, all eager to hear Malik's ideas. He met with venture capitalists, environmental organizations, and even representatives from government energy departments. They were all intrigued by his system, its ability to generate sustainable energy from hybrid solar and wind technology, and its potential to revolutionize access to electricity in underserved communities. But Malik knew that securing funding and forming partnerships would require more than just a good idea, it would require trust, conviction, and a deep understanding of the industry's complexities. It wasn't long before Malik found himself at the summit, surrounded by some of the most influential people in the world of renewable energy. The venue was packed with high-level executives, environmental activists, engineers, and scientists. The air buzzed with the collective energy of people passionate about changing the future. As he stood at the entrance, waiting for his turn to pitch, Malik couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. This was the culmination of everything he had worked for, the chance to bring his dream to life. His heart pounded in his chest, but he tried to calm his nerves. Just breathe, he muttered to himself, reminding himself of Jasmine's words. Just breathe and believe in your work. Soon, his name was called. The room was filled with quiet murmurs as Malik made his way to the stage, the spotlight shining down on him. He glanced at the faces in the audience, some were familiar, others were new, but all were experts in their fields. He felt the pressure mounting, but he held himself together. He took a deep breath and began. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malik Johnson, and today, I'm here to talk to you about the future of renewable energy. More specifically, I'm here to talk about how we can make clean energy more accessible, sustainable, and affordable for the communities that need it most. He launched into his pitch, explaining the key principles behind his hybrid solar system, its ability to harness both solar and wind energy in a compact, efficient unit. He spoke passionately about his vision for expanding energy access to rural communities, where traditional energy infrastructure was either too expensive or simply unavailable. As he spoke, Malik could feel the room's attention shifting. There were nods of approval, murmurs of interest, and even a few questions about his system's scalability and real-world applications. But it wasn't until the final moments of his presentation that Malik felt something click. This system, he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction, is more than just a new way to generate energy. It's a way to bring opportunity to those who have been left behind. It's a way to give power back to the people who need it the most. This is not just about technology, it's about humanity. A brief silence followed his statement, and then the room erupted in applause. Malik's heart soared. He had done it. He had spoken from the heart, and he had connected with his audience in a way he hadn't expected. As the applause died down, Dr. Baines stood from her seat in the front row and motioned for Malik to approach the stage. You've certainly impressed everyone here, Malik, she said, her voice warm but commanding. Your passion and your vision are undeniable. You've got something special here, and I think this is only the beginning. Malik smiled, his confidence growing with each word. Thank you, Dr. Baines. I believe in this system, and I believe in its potential to make a real difference. After the pitch, he was swarmed by potential investors, environmental groups, and even local government representatives interested in working with him to implement his technology. It was everything he had dreamed of, and more. As the summit came to a close, Malik found himself sitting alone in the lobby, reflecting on the day. He had done it, he had stepped up to the challenge and shared his vision with the world. He had made connections that could help him take his project further, and he had proven to himself that he belonged in this space. Jasmine found him sitting there, a proud smile on her face. Well, she asked, her voice full of curiosity. Malik laughed, the tension in his shoulders finally easing. It went better than I could have imagined. I think I've got some serious interest in my system. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. That's an understatement. You crushed it, Malik. He grinned, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I couldn't have done it without you, Jazz. You've been with me every step of the way. She shrugged, the smile never leaving her face. I just gave you a little push when you needed it. The rest was all you. Malik paused, looking out at the city skyline through the summit's windows. This isn't just about me, Jasmine. This is about giving people a future, about making sure that energy isn't something only the privileged have access to. This is bigger than just a project. Jasmine's eyes softened. I know, Malik. And I'm so proud of everything you've already done. Malik looked back at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. This is only the beginning. I'm ready for whatever comes next. As the sun set over the summit, Malik felt like he was standing on the edge of something monumental. He didn't know exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain, he was no longer just a student with a big idea, he was a changemaker. And the road to revolutionizing the energy world had just begun. The days following the summit were a blur of emails, phone calls, and meetings. Malik had barely had time to breathe, let alone process everything that had happened. But one thing was clear, his life had changed. What had once been a passion project now had the potential to reshape the future of renewable energy. He had connected with some of the biggest names in the industry, and now he had to prove he could turn his vision into a reality. But with the excitement came new challenges. Some investors were eager to back his project, but they wanted to see more data, more proof that his hybrid solar-wind system would work at scale. Some of the companies he'd spoken to wanted him to partner with established manufacturers, something that made Malik uneasy. Would he be able to maintain control of his idea, or would he be swallowed up by corporate interests? It was a tough balancing act. On one hand, he had the chance to secure funding and resources that could push his project to the next level. On the other, he had to be careful not to lose the core of what made his idea unique. He spent hours poring over his notes, refining his data, and coming up with strategies to address the questions and concerns raised during the summit. But no matter how much work he put in, the weight of the decisions ahead never seemed to lessen. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling phone call with a venture capital firm that was showing interest in his project, Malik sat in his small office, rubbing his temples. The pressure was mounting, and he could feel the stress creeping in. He was so close to realizing his dream, yet everything felt uncertain. What if it all fell apart? Just then, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Jasmine. How's everything going, Malik? You look like you could use a break. Don't forget to take care of yourself. I'm always here if you need to talk. Her message was like a lifeline. She had been there for him since the beginning, and no matter how high the stakes got, he could always count on her for support. Malik smiled as he typed his response. I'm hanging in there, Jazz. Thanks for checking in. It's just a lot to handle, you know. But I'll get through it. The truth was, he didn't know how much longer he could keep going at this pace. He needed to recharge, to clear his mind, and maybe even take a step back and reevaluate. But there was no time for that now. Not when he was so close. That evening, after another full day of back-to-back meetings and planning sessions, Malik found himself standing outside in the cool night air. The campus was quiet, the usual hustle and bustle of student life temporarily subdued. He looked up at the stars, taking in the vastness of the universe, and for a moment, he allowed himself to simply breathe. He thought back to when he first came up with the idea for his hybrid energy system. It had started as a way to solve a small problem in his own community, but over time, it had grown into something much bigger. Something that could impact millions of lives. And now, here he was, standing on the edge of turning that idea into reality. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges were far from over. But Malik realized something important in that quiet moment: he had already come further than he had ever dreamed. The journey wasn't about avoiding obstacles, it was about pushing through them, no matter how tough it got. The next morning, Malik woke up early. He had a new sense of clarity. It was time to take charge, to make the tough decisions that would shape the future of his project. No more second-guessing. No more waiting for the perfect opportunity. He was ready to forge ahead. The first step was to meet with the investors who had shown the most interest at the summit. Malik knew that securing their commitment would be crucial, but he also knew he needed to be cautious. This was his dream, and he couldn't afford to let anyone take that away from him. He arrived at the meeting room, where two venture capitalists sat waiting for him. The conversation began with small talk, but Malik quickly steered it toward the most important topic, the future of his hybrid solar wind system. "I appreciate your interest in my project," Malik began, his voice calm but firm. "But I want to make it clear that this is not just a business venture to me. It's about making a real impact on the world. I'm looking for partners who share that vision, who understand the importance of bringing clean, affordable energy to underserved communities." The investors exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. Malik could see that they were impressed, but he also knew they were going to ask tough questions. "Let's talk scalability," one of the investors said. "How do you plan to take this system from prototype to full-scale production? And what's the timeline for that?" Malik had anticipated this question. "I've already started working with a few manufacturers who have the capacity to scale production. We're also in talks with some government agencies to help fund the deployment of this technology in rural areas. The goal is to have a pilot program running within the next 6 months, and I expect full-scale production to begin within the next 2 years." The investors nodded, but one raised an eyebrow. "And what about market competition? There are a lot of companies working on similar technologies. What makes your system stand out?" Malik leaned forward. "What sets my system apart is its versatility. It combines both solar and wind energy, which means it's not reliant on one source. It can work in a variety of environments, from sunny deserts to windy coastal areas, and it's modular, meaning it can be scaled up or down depending on the needs of the community." He could tell that his answer had struck a chord. They were listening now, really listening. After a few more questions and a discussion about potential partnerships, Malik felt a sense of accomplishment. The investors were interested, they weren't ready to sign anything yet, but they were definitely considering it. As the meeting concluded, one of the investors extended his hand. "We're impressed, Malik. We'll be in touch soon, but you've definitely got our attention." Malik smiled, shaking his hand. "Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do together." As he left the meeting, Malik felt a mix of excitement and relief. This was just one step, but it was an important one. The road ahead would be full of hurdles, but he was no longer afraid. He had made it this far, and he was ready to keep going. Later that evening, Malik called Jasmine to update her. "It went well," he said, his voice full of optimism. "They're interested. They want to move forward, but we're not there yet. Still, it's a big step." Jasmine's voice was filled with pride. "I knew you could do it, Malik. This is just the beginning. You've got the passion, the drive, and now you've got people backing you up. You're going to change the world." Malik looked out at the city below, a sense of determination rising within him. "Yeah, I'm going to change the world. And nothing is going to stop me." The weeks that followed Malik's meeting with the investors were a whirlwind of activity. After their initial interest, the venture capitalists had asked for more details, more data, and more proof that his hybrid energy system would work on a large scale. Malik had no intention of backing down now, but the pressure was starting to take its toll. Every day felt like a marathon, long hours spent refining his pitch, negotiating terms, and working with engineers to perfect the technology. The financial backing he needed was within reach, but every step felt like a precarious balancing act. One misstep, one wrong decision, and it could all come crashing down. But through it all, Malik remained focused. He couldn't afford to think about the potential failure. He had come too far, worked too hard, and believed too deeply in his vision for that. This project wasn't just about money, it was about revolutionizing energy access, about creating a world where clean, affordable power was available to everyone, not just the privileged few. One evening, as he sat in his cramped office at the university, Malik received a call that would change everything. "Malik, it's Dr. Baines," the familiar voice said on the other end. "I've got some good news." Malik's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on, Dr. Baines? Is it about the investors?" "Better than that. We've secured a partnership with one of the largest energy providers in the country. They're backing your project, fully funding the first phase of deployment. This is huge, Malik. This is exactly what you've been working toward." Malik could hardly believe what he was hearing. For a moment, he was speechless. He had poured everything into this project, his time, his energy, his future, and now, it was happening. "Wait," he finally said, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is real. You're telling me that we've got the funding to move forward?" Dr. Baines laughed softly. "Yes, Malik, we've got the funding. They're ready to take this to the next level. But we'll need to move fast. The first pilot program could launch within months." The weight of the news hit Malik all at once. The dream he had envisioned years ago was finally becoming a reality. The next few months would be a blur of planning, construction, and collaboration as he worked with the energy provider to roll out the first units of his hybrid solar wind system. As Malik stood outside that night, staring up at the stars, he thought about how far he had come. Just a year ago, he had been a college student with a bold idea and nothing more. He had struggled, faced setbacks, and doubted himself countless times. But now, he was on the verge of something monumental, a breakthrough that could change the lives of millions of people. Jasmine called him just after midnight, her voice filled with joy. "I heard the news, Malik. This is it, isn't it? You did it." He could hear the excitement in her voice, and it brought a smile to his face. "Yeah, Jazz. We did it. We're going to change the world." They both knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be filled with challenges, obstacles, and tough decisions. But Malik had never felt more ready. With the backing of powerful partners, the support of his friends and mentors, and the unwavering belief in his vision, he knew that nothing could stop him now. The first few weeks of the pilot program were a blur of activity. Engineers worked around the clock to assemble the first prototype systems, and Malik was deeply involved in every step of the process. He spent long hours coordinating with the energy provider's team, making sure that every detail of the installation and testing was perfect. There were technical challenges, logistical hurdles, and a fair share of setbacks along the way. But through it all, Malik remained focused. And then, after months of preparation, it happened. The first hybrid solar wind system was fully operational, producing renewable energy in a remote community that had never had reliable electricity before. Malik watched as the system powered homes, schools, and hospitals, bringing light to places that had been in darkness for decades. It was everything he had dreamed of. But the real breakthrough came when a local family approached Malik, expressing their gratitude. "Thank you," the father said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've given us hope. My children now have lights to study by. My wife can cook with electricity instead of using firewood. You've changed our lives." Malik's heart swelled. He had always known that his technology had the potential to make a difference, but standing there, hearing those words, he realized just how far-reaching the impact could be. Months passed, and Malik's hybrid energy system began to spread to more communities. The success of the pilot program led to more funding, more partnerships, and more opportunities. As his system became more refined and widely adopted, the energy provider's commitment grew stronger. And with that, Malik's network of supporters and collaborators expanded. He was no longer just a student with a vision, he was a leader in the renewable energy revolution. The media caught wind of Malik's success, and soon, stories about his groundbreaking work were everywhere. He was invited to speak at conferences, meet with government leaders, and collaborate with environmental organizations. His work was being recognized as not just a technical achievement but a beacon of hope for a more sustainable future. But no matter how successful Malik became, he never lost sight of what mattered most. It was always about more than just the technology. It was about people, the families, the communities, the children who now had a brighter future because of the clean energy Malik had brought to their lives. 1 year after the summit, Malik stood at the front of a crowded room at an international renewable energy conference. His hybrid solar wind system was now in full-scale production, and its impact had far exceeded even his wildest expectations. He looked out at the sea of faces, industry leaders, scientists, politicians, and felt a sense of pride that was hard to put into words. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium, ready to speak to a room full of people who shared his passion for change. "Thank you for having me here today," Malik began, his voice steady and filled with conviction. "A year ago, I was standing at a crossroads. I had an idea that I believed could change the world. But ideas alone aren't enough. It takes hard work, perseverance, and the support of people who believe in that idea, just as much as you do." He paused, looking around the room. "What we're doing here isn't just about technology. It's about making sure that no one is left behind. It's about bringing power, real power, to the people who need it the most. And it's about creating a future where every child, every family, and every community has access to clean, affordable energy." The room erupted in applause, but Malik's heart wasn't filled with pride, it was filled with hope. Because he knew this was just the beginning. There was so much more to do, so many more lives to change. And with every new challenge, every new partnership, he would continue to push forward. As Malik stepped off the stage, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned around to find Jasmine, beaming with pride. "You did it, Malik," she said, her voice full of admiration. "You really did it." Malik smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. "We did it, Jasmine. Together." And as they walked off into the future, hand in hand, Malik knew that the road ahead would be full of more obstacles and challenges. But with passion, perseverance, and the support of those he loved, there was nothing he couldn't accomplish. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?